Can we have everyone seated so that our presenters won't have to stare down on empty chairs? I think we'll resume now. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from the lunch. It was a sumptuous meal, so I hope the lunch won't put you all in food coma. We'll begin. We'll resume now. The next session was supposed to happen pre-lunch, but better late than never. So the next session, as I said earlier, will be on how a global Creative Commons, or GCC as they say, can support bottom-up development through open knowledge networks. First up, we have Professor John Crawford, an expert in systems biology and sustainable ecology. And following him up would be Creon Skippen, who brings farming experience and business insight, and will share how shared digital tools and collaborative innovation can empower communities worldwide. This session will explore practical models that blend science, systems thinking, and participatory design to tackle local challenges with global support. Professor Crawford and Skippen, you have the floor for the next 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Yes.
And the clock has started. I hope you've all had a good lunch. I just texted my wife to say that I don't think I've ever felt such an imposter in my whole life. The three reasons for that: I'm a Scotsman in Bhutan, trying to say something that is relevant to the people of Bhutan. Secondly, everybody's been talking about their successes and how they've learned from their successes and how they can build on their successes. And I'm going to talk about failure and what I learned from failing. And then the third reason I feel an imposter is because I'm a scientist. And worse than that, I'm a physicist. So on my laptop cover, I have a picture of a brain, and on the left side, this is me. And on the right side, this is all of you. This is the creative part. And I've always wanted to be on this side. So anyway, this is why I feel like an imposter. So, and I can't work the slide controller, that's another reason. Should I be pointing this somewhere? There's 4 reasons why I feel like an imposter. That's not just me. Stop the clock. I get extra time. Stop the clock. Ah, it stopped. So sorry, sir. That's okay. Thank you. Okay, so this is a story of the last 5 years of my life. I moved to Glasgow University as I approached the end of my career, I thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to figure out how all of the stuff I've done, and most of my research has been on understanding soil and soil health and how the physics and the biology work together. And I thought I'd like to spend the rest of my career trying to deliver impact, because I take very seriously the climate and biodiversity crisis, and I wanted to do something impactful. And so I just asked myself the question, why are we not doing things at scale fast enough to have an impact on climate or biodiversity? We're very good at talking, we're not so good at doing. And I had been doing some consultancies with some big companies on the left-hand side there. And so I managed to convince them to come together because they were all kind of trying to answer the same questions but not talking to each other. And we figured if we got together, we could do something impactful. So my passion for restoring soil health globally, we had the capacity, the reach, and the capability to restore the health on 60% of the world's agricultural soils. And the purpose of the coalition was to develop the investable framework. That's what I was told. We have to develop the in other words, how can we make money out of restoring soil health? Never mind all the benefits in terms of storing carbon, securing water and food for the future. And I'm going to cut a very long story short. After getting involved and sucked into a World Economic Forum Lighthouse project and working with the UN and the OECD and all these great guys, I came to the conclusion that top-down solutions are not the way forward. It was too difficult to move from talking to action and to get the companies' mindsets to change from being, for example, a chemistry company into a solutions company. So in the meantime, I've been doing some work on alternative solutions, and Kirian, who will speak after me, and I started to talk together about how do we deliver and scale up solutions starting from the farmer. And just shortly before that, I'd met and made friends with this guy on the right, Stuart Kaufman, who's done a lot of work and research on network theory and a whole bunch of other things. And I wanted to collaborate with him on soil and how to understand soil as a complex network. But then we started talking about how to scale up solutions fast. And it's also a network problem. Now, Stuart has developed this really interesting theory called the theory of the adjacent possible, which is a very grand title for a theory. The bottom line, or the conclusion of this theory that we can draw from for this meeting is that the only way forward is bottom up. You cannot deliver change if you want to integrate human behavior with the environment, with the economy. You can prove mathematically that you cannot do that with a command and control top-down mindset. The second insight was some research that I was doing on trying to figure out why it's so hard to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. Gross national happiness, like the Sustainable Development Goals, is basically a very high, what physicists would call a very high dimensional optimization problem. You're trying to do lots of things all at once, really well, and you're trying to figure out how to do that as well as you possibly can. And we're just publishing a paper on this quite soon. It turns out that you cannot predict, you cannot design interventions up front that will optimize the outcomes when all of your targets interact. So that web on the top right-hand corner, those are the targets for the Sustainable Development Goals. And they form an incredibly highly interacting set. If you meet one target, you're going to impact on your ability to meet another target. And you do that in a massively complex way. It turns out you can't predict the consequences. And it's not surprising that only 17% of the Sustainable Development Goals are on track, And if you look even at relatively simple policies that aim at emissions reduction, a very recent paper studied 1,500 emissions reduction policies globally, and only 63 of them had any demonstrable impact. And that's not because politicians are not intelligent, it's because it's incredibly hard to do more than one thing. It's incredibly hard. In fact, in practical terms, and we say this in our paper, you cannot do it. So how do you do it? If you're not in control, how do you manage? I love this quote from George Box, who was the president of the American Statistical Association. The only way to know how a complex system will behave after you modify it is to modify it and see how it behaves. And I 100% believe that, and I believe the previous two pieces of scientific work demonstrate why that is absolutely the case. So you don't manage with a command and control mindset, you manage with a participatory mindset. You participate with the system, which means that you learn by doing. And we had nice presentations earlier about how real education is about learning by doing. And you know, I can probably provide a mathematical proof of that, right? It's not an opinion, it's a fact. But the challenge with learning by doing is it can be slow. And we don't have a lot of time. It can also be very resource intensive. It involves a lot of hand-holding, and it can be expensive to scale up. So how do we overcome the fact that learning by doing is slow and expensive to scale? So the idea that we've come up with is that we build this thing called a global Creative Commons, which is essentially a platform for collective development. So it's, first of all, as a global Creative Commons, it has to be trusted. So we've established it as a digital cooperative, which means that farmers own it. It can never be sold, and they're in complete control of their knowledge and data. They choose to share it or not. The platform is designed primarily to enable sharing, because the essence of learning by doing and scaling and accelerating learning by doing is to do it on a massive scale and share what works and what doesn't work. So you learn from each other and you accelerate the process of learning by doing it in lots of places all at the one time. It also promotes innovation, because the biosphere, economic systems, social systems, they innovate by sharing ideas. That's how the economy, there's no such thing as a new idea, there's just a recombination of existing ideas in a novel way. And sometimes you make a mistake and that becomes an innovation. And then it has to be global, because we need people from different backgrounds to share perspectives and successes and failures. Because many of us are moving into an environment that we've never experienced before. This is broadly what it looks like, and I don't have a lot of time to go into detail. But on the right-hand side, you see at the bottom level, there's knowledge and data. And as you move further up, there's enabling functionality that allows the sharing of that, the reporting of impacts, that you can potentially monetize impacts through carbon credits or knowledge credits, sharing credits. Digital tokenization, which enables you to be associated with innovations, with discoveries that are then shared in the Creative Commons. And then an artificial intelligence layer, which allows you to synthesize knowledge. Only the knowledge that is shared on the platform amongst each other in ways that can be made accessible. And the hope is that by creating a platform like this, plus the functionality on top of it, it becomes possible to monetize many of the things that farmers currently do not monetize, like the ecosystem services they provide, like the innovations that they might undertake on farm, biodiversity credits, things like that. The key thing about a sharing platform and a global Creative Commons is that the rate of innovation scales as the square of the number of participants, right? So every time you double the number of participants, the rate of innovation goes up by 4. And it scales hyperbolically in time, so that's faster than exponential. So the bigger this gets, the easier it gets to solve problems. So it's no longer a scaling problem, it's a scaling opportunity. I'm going to hand over to Kirian because the key bit of this has been and continues to be how we make sure that this is self-scaling in the sense that it's self-financing. We talked about finance this morning. It's hard to get these kind of things off the ground and take it to scale fast enough to have the impact that we need in the time that we've got left. And Kirian's going to explain exactly how we do it, how we might do that.
Thank you, John. You can tell I'm not the professor because my diagram is somewhat simpler and has less parts to it. I thought it would just be useful to give a little bit of context as to sort of how and why I'm looking at this. So I grew up in a family with farms, so grew up in farming. But I did a scientific degree and then I went into multinational industry. One of those industries was chemicals as well. So I've been at the extreme end. But I suppose coming back to that, I like balance, I like nature, and my heart also sits at the farm level. So being able to leverage greater value for farmers is something which I'm really keen on pursuing, especially as I've seen farmers get made the risk-taking entity an awful lot, and I've seen one company taking 5 bites of the cherry out of the farm, and there's not a lot left for the farm after that. So, what are we really aiming to achieve? We want to help farmers make better decisions faster, and we want them to get rewarded for it. As John's already highlighted, trust is really important to this. So at the base layer, with the farm and landscape data platform, and I call it landscape, it doesn't just have to be farmers, there's an awful lot of people who manage land for different reasons and in different ways, and the information is equally important. But if they are in control, as much as they can be, of their data and the information that they're collecting, that aids trust for them between each other. But actually, working with the business sector as well, a lot of them want information directly from the farm, so it also aids trust from the business side as well. So we have the farms and associated stakeholders. Farmers are continually applying their operations with inputs as well, so whether it be fertilizers or including water, actions like cultivations, soil, lots of different types of information coming from the farms. We also want to incorporate third-party applications as well. There's a huge amount of data being collected. We've got data coming direct off machinery, we've got biodiversity data, we've got water data, energy data, all these things that are going into the farm currently. And then, as John's talked about very importantly, we've got the science as well. And the science link is very important, and that's a two-way link. I find quite often the science is working on either what is getting funding or what the scientists are finding interesting, but they're not really working on what's causing a blockage and what we're not moving on to. So this allows the scientists to be informed as to where the most pressing issues are, and it allows the scientific community to work on that. It allows them to share information with the farms, so the farms can then apply where they were yesterday versus today versus where they want to be tomorrow, and support that with evidence from the farm. And then when it comes to the market link, that makes it far more powerful and far more reliable. So I've got data clients in there, which can be water companies, insurance companies, bakeries, banks, almost infinite number of people that are integrating. And then I put a dollar sign there as well, and I thought that might be the elephant in the room here, but I'm going to steal a phrase that I heard this morning, which I think is brilliant, which is financial energy. So that is financial energy, and that helps facilitate and provides the incentive for all the different stakeholders involved. So starting the loop, how do we do that? I've modeled the propositions, so identify a problem and model it. I'll come on to the exact example in a second. Gather the participants. Gather sort of committed participants is a really important part to this. So in the UK, I've got a group together called the AICC. They cover just over half of UK advice into farmland now, so they're advising over half of the UK farms. They're independent as well, which is important for trust. They're not attached to any chemical companies or any vested interests. And they're covering about 2.2 million hectares in the UK. And the other important part is to ensure gain. So we came onto that financial energy. It doesn't have to be financial, but I think it was also something else that was mentioned this morning, which was sort of, benefit optimization. But just ensure there's a gain for each stakeholder at each stage. Something quite early on, I went from university and I got into a management position very quickly, and I was incredibly naive, and someone came to me one day and he said, it's all very well you going for improvement all the time and trying to make changes. He said, but it really makes me nervous. He said, not all of us want to change or improve. He said, I just want to get paid and go home and watch rubbish TV. But it was a real realization for me that actually everyone doesn't want to change. They do fear things. So now it made me far more aware of unintended consequences and dropping barriers to change, because you get very good ideas, but they reach barriers, sometimes for reasons people can't fathom, but it's quite often personal. So the ethos has been in the loop that we're putting together to drop the barriers as much as we can. So include all the participants in the old model so that they're gaining from the new model, and they can kind of gain and get involved before they really realize that they're involved. And then initiate with controlled groups, which can be monitored and discipline maintained. So I talked about the AICC group in the UK, and I've now got a group within that which controls 120,000 hectares and 700 farms, which I realise will probably sound pretty minimal, especially to those of you from India. But they can then advocate, and we can then get from the pilot position where we were, where we sort of proved that it works, and we can get to break even and scale up. And John's talked about how quickly these things scale. And then if everyone's gaining, this is what we're trying to provide them with. If the companies are gaining, if the advisors are gaining, if the buying groups are gaining, if everyone interacting is gaining, then why wouldn't they want to do more? So I'm just going to use a very quick example because I'm over time already. But that's water, and I've heard a lot of people talking about water, and I've had conversations, so it's fairly universal. But I modelled the water risk in the UK, both from a position of sort of leaching and input issues, but also from flooding and drought exposure, and the liability that sat on the water companies for those, and worked it out per hectare of farmland. So we worked with water companies to engage in the information sharing with the farmers, and we devised, I think, a simple initial step was really important. But just by sharing cropping and some tillage information, the water companies could extract a value from that, both from efficiency, but also sort of risk and damage. So they could pick up hotspots of crops where different products they know get used and that could appear. They could incentivize the farmers not to use those products. So it was costing the water company money, but it was saving them money. The farmers were not losing out, actually. They're gaining money from the sharing loop. But also, like I said, we brought the agronomists and the advisors and the other groups into it as well. So everyone was gaining from the incentive. And then as a result, we've had a financial benefit, and we're also having an environmental benefit, because that's what we're trying to drive, is that balance that I talked about at the start, and deliver that sort of that harmony where possible. So I'm going to finish there because I'm well over time, but that's how we've started the process and got it going, and hopefully we can continue that. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Creon, for insights into the global Creative Commons. So it's something that we can really learn from, and the new ideas to explore. We'll now quickly move on to our next session. Sneha will come here and present a new idea called the New Earth Ecosystem. So I'm told it's about mixing smart technology, positive mindset, and a community to working together, building places where people can truly live well. So maybe a community where everything is positive and everyone is happy, and the essence of GNH is truly seen. So Sneha, the floor is yours now and your session, I guess, is 15 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon. All right. So in this presentation, what I would like to present is that how can we create tech ecosystem and empower villages to help themselves. And I would like to start with first that what does development really mean? And the true purpose of development is to elevate suffering for all. But the GDP mindset, elevates suffering for few, but by transferring the suffering to others. And therefore, there is a need for a mindset shift, which we've been talking about from GDP to GNH. Now, well-being alliance nations and nations like Bhutan have the mindset, but the challenge is in operationalizing GNH, that how do we really operationalize GNH on ground? And for that, we first need to understand that how does development occur? What makes development tick? So for development, like for example, development of cities, government invests in public infrastructures. Like for example, the ecosystem is created through clustering of resources, like knowledge institutions, banks, marketplaces, and people come together in cities, and that's how the development occurs, because ecosystem reduces the transactions cost for people to exchange ideas, for people to build products and provide services. But what we are saying here is that maybe the cities often create, winning situation for few, but leaves many behind. It's not that cities are not required, but it creates winning situation for few, but leaves many behind. And what we are saying with the smart omni-village approach is that maybe in the digital age, we may not need such clustering of resources. Such ecosystem can be created through digital public infrastructure instead of physical public infrastructure. So maybe digital banks, digital data infrastructure, digital marketplaces, and digital knowledge institutions. And why this is important is because half of the world's population still resides in villages, and in developing nations like Bhutan and Southeast Asian countries, it is more than half of the world's population that still resides in villages. And at present, they're served with siloed initiatives, majorly by private players, and lack holistic digital public infrastructure that can create an ecosystem effect for the transactions cost to come down and for development of the villages to happen. And it is also important for transparent bottom-up national and global order, because development is not only about creating ecosystem effect in cities, but it is also about coordinating development between various different regions, be it at district level, at national level, at bioregional level, or at global level. So at present, we do not have a transparent either data infrastructure or a knowledge infrastructure that can help decision makers coordinate their development efforts across the regions. So how can we create such an ecosystem? And through my presentation, I propose 5 pillars of this digital development ecosystem. The first one is the National Digital Identity Framework. The second is data-driven decision-making. Third, network knowledge and learning. Fourth, decentralized financial infrastructure. And fifth, open digital marketplaces. Let me run you through each of these pillars. So number one, National Digital Identity Framework. So before internet, usually meetups or yellow pages would allow people to network with each other. With clustering of resources in cities, when people come together in cities, the personal meetups allow people to network with each other and exchange ideas. With the advent of LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, people would find themselves on internet and network with each other. But problem with this centralized private platforms is that often our data is given to them but is not received back, right? And there is lack of trust and transparency. So Bhutan has already pioneered national digital identity, which is based on decentralized network, and it is not a centralized platform, it is self-sovereign identity. If we build a social network on top of that, which villagers can access, then they will be able to network with each other at a much lower cost, and maybe at a cost which the cities provide, the platform for people to network with each other. Second is the data-driven decision-making. So at present, if we look at our data infrastructure, it is mostly siloed. It is either aggregated at district level, at national level, or at global level. But when it comes to village level, we do not have village-level data dashboards that can give us grassroots insights that what is needed at the village level. And then there is also fragmentation between food data, for example, farming-related data with one organization, and then water-related data with another organization. And for a common man in the village to access their own data is such a difficult task. To get their own holistic picture that how my village is doing is such a difficult task. So the idea here is what if we create village-level balance sheets, a village-level data dashboard that can come together to become district-level data dashboards, which can come together to become provincial level, national level, bioregional level, and ultimately a earth-level data dashboard, which can give insights to the people. And why these data dashboards are helpful is, for example, when we did this for Ruka in Bhutan, we found out that, and even as part of Global Soil Health Program, when we want to help farmers for soil restoration, we actually do not know where these farmers are and where these lands are where the soil is degraded. So when we did this survey from each household in Ruka village, we found out that from their lived experience, they reported that the soil health is declining, which was validated by also the soil report that we got from the laboratory. So if we have such insights from the grassroots level that what is actually needed, then the next thing that we need to do is either mobilize, to solve any problem, what is needed is either knowledge, either funding, or combination of both. So the next 2 pillars builds on this pillar. Once the needs are identified at the village level, how can we match them with right knowledge and right funding for them to solve their problems? So the next is network knowledge and learning. Again, before internet, knowledge access, as we know, was the transactions cost of accessing any knowledge was very, very high. Internet brought down that cost to a certain extent, but again, today on the internet, the knowledge is mostly dominated by research institutions and is fragmented. The knowledge from the East is very less represented, and the knowledge from the Western countries is more dominated. So the indigenous knowledge is missing on internet. So the idea is, from these villages, what if we can build a networked peer-to-peer learning platform where we learn from the success stories of the villages from across the world, and based on the data, the needs that we identify in the village. So for example, in Ruka, we have to solve the water problem. So if we learn from another village where the spring shed management has been successfully applied, and the AI can give the solution to the villagers, step-by-step guiding how you can solve your water challenges, then that can reduce the cost of knowledge access and problem solving at the village level. So the idea is to build a decentralized knowledge network And we propose building a One Bhutan knowledge network which can connect all the knowledge that resides in the universities here. So for example, last year, in August when we were here, after the conference, we visited College of Natural Resources, and they have this wonderful library and in-depth research into farming practices in Bhutan, but none of that is accessible at present to any farmers. That is, it is just lying in the library of the College of Natural Resources. So if we digitize it and if we build a AI layer on top of that which can translate that knowledge even into local dialects, then that knowledge can help the villagers and the farmers in those villages develop integrally. And once we have knowledge, so knowledge alone cannot solve all the problems. It has to be matched by funding. And we discussed the idea of the social stock exchange also. So even regarding funding also right now, there are many platforms that provide funding. Like there's GoFundMe, there is Kickstarter, then there are so many crowdfunding platforms. But again, the transactions cost for a village project or a small project to be listed on so many platforms is so high. So what if we build a global social stock exchange which is built on a common protocol or an architecture where we list a project and can be matched with funding. So it can help the regulators also, it can help the investors also, and it can help the small projects from the villages to access funding at much lower cost than at present. And then the last pillar is open digital marketplaces. As we know that for any economic development to happen, market access is one of the biggest factors. And if we can create digital marketplaces for these villages which are networked together, so for example, if we create a network between 500 villages, digital marketplaces, so they can trade between them. And the beautiful part about this network is that if the net worth of the network lies in size. So if there are 1,000 villages in the network, it provides more economic opportunities to trade, and it could be digitally operated, digitally regulated, and can be accessed by the farmers to list their products here. So India has already pioneered open network for digital commerce, which breaks through the centralization of platforms like Amazon, which centralizes all the services, and how it level plays the field and democratizes the marketplace so that different players can even provide small services. It could be maybe, Rukha is known for his smoked fish. So there's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to maybe set up a local supply chain, a logistic supply chain, which can deliver the smoked fish from Rukha to other parts of Bhutan and even abroad for that matter. So now all of these 5 pillars, it's not that it is something new, I'm not presenting anything new here. All of these 5 pillars have been implemented, piloted, and successfully in some countries, but no country has done it in an integrated manner. So maybe Kenya has done it for peer-to-peer farmer learning network. NDI or digital identity frameworks have been adopted by many countries, but there has been no country so far which has done all of these 5 pillars in an integrated manner. And we think that Bhutan could be the first country to realize this whole ecosystem in an integrated manner with all of the 5 pillars in place. It already has NDI, and we can look at how it can build the rest of the 4 pillars to empower the villages to help themselves to develop. So this is a schema that how this could work. So the basic thing which this platform solves is that it helps to reduce the transaction cost between matching of demand and supply, be it data, be it knowledge, be it funding, or be it even the regulation and the government schemes. So once we get One Bhutan network, there could be an AI which could help the national government here for nuanced governance, evidence-based nuanced governance with the help of AI, which can give insights to maybe the Prime Minister's office on what's happening in each village and what is needed, and allocate funds accordingly, or what regulations are needed where. And when then it is done or extended on a shared global architecture, for example, HTTP, why we can access websites, whatever websites are being put up on internet is because it follows a common protocol, which is HTTP, and it is hosted on that. So if such an architecture, technological architecture is built on a shared protocol, then it can become a one earth network, and we can have planetary governance or a new planetary ethic and resource allocation. So, we learned from John that the top-down solutions are not working. So it is aggregated bottom-up. So we can have village and city networks, which comes together to become district networks, provincial networks, national networks, regional networks, and then ultimately the planetary network. But building tech alone, as we have learned in yesterday also, cannot help solve all the problems. It needs to come with right value systems also. And that is why ecosystem of initiatives approach is very important, and capacity building and training is very important. So so once it is operationalized, what this can facilitate is essential provisions for all, because we would know where there is lack of water, where there is lack of food, and then targeted solutions can be delivered there. Reimagining work-life balance, because it can reduce a lot of duplication of efforts. So again, to share a small example from Rukha, when we were doing the village level balance sheet, we had 2 other teams coming in there, and they were doing survey of just a subset of the information that we were collecting there. So you can imagine there's so much duplication of efforts that's happening in this space. And then enhanced governance, efficient resource and financial management. And then ultimate goal is to create an omni-win situation for the humanity, where the well-being of all is taken care of. And each person is counted in the system. And the gaps of fulfilling the development of each person is accounted for in the balance sheet. Sorry. So what we're doing is learning by doing. We've already started taking small baby step towards creating this ecosystem. So we built an app to create village level data dashboard. Bhutan already has NDI, so the first pillar is already there. We are working on second pillar right now. So we built one village balance sheet, the demonstration of which you can see in the exhibit area, the first dashboard that we have. And now we are building a test AI model and the knowledge network that could, help the villages to access the knowledge. And then the app can already be extended to 600 villages in Bhutan, and we can have balance sheets for 600 villages here. So the next step we have is to collaborate to build the whole ecosystem in place. So in a nutshell, this is where I would leave this to, and I look forward to your comments and insights on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sneha. We will continue this conversation of New Earth ecosystems and how, because we have heard stories of how Tarayana's work, the bottom-up approach is working. So now how do we use that, the framework of GNH and all, to on a larger global scale? So this would be our next conversation, the panel discussion. So we'll be joined by experts from Bhutan and beyond, and they will share models showing how digital ecosystems can help bring gross national happiness to life on a larger scale. So I'd like to call on stage moderator Andrew. I can't find Andrew in the hall. Andrew? Yes, our moderator is hiding in some other room. So he will take us through the next 45 minutes of discussion on how we can use digital public infrastructure, covering identity, finance data, marketplaces, and governance to support well-being centered and bottom-up development that we have been so much focusing on over the past yesterday and today. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Okay, can I invite all the All right, you've already had a very heavy afternoon on digital. Dasho is leading the GovTech movement in the whole of country. John, you know already, and Sneha, you know. So the key issue here, before all of us, is how should we think about the digital public infrastructure and how we could use this to help, generate more gross national happiness. That's a broad general direction. Maybe, Dasho, if you sort of have since you have a little, fresh compared to the herd to the other two, may I impose on you to just explain how you're rolling out, the digital public infrastructure in Bhutan.
Okay, so I think maybe taking off from where Sneha touched on. So Bhutan has looked at our national digital identity as a means to take government services to our citizens, and really leveraging on the advantages of going online. And this is something that we started a few years after internet was introduced by our grade 4th in 1999. In 2003, we created a new ministry and a department, and we huddled together to try and figure out how can we use this new technology to improve government. And one of the areas that we looked at was the opportunity to overcome the challenge of distance by using, the internet, whether it was in terms of providing access to information or taking services online. And that's where we realized, learning by doing, that the complexity of moving services online is that we also need to be able to identify people, and that's where the need for identity arose. We looked at best practices around the world. I think we are very lucky to be neighbors with India and the exceptional work that has been implemented using Aadhaar. We looked at best practices in Europe in terms of what Estonia was doing and what Singapore was doing. And we were actually very close to implementing a centralized digital identity. And that's where, again, we had, the luck of having a visionary leader who spent a lot of time thinking about not just quickly leveraging advantages, but rather also thinking about some of the dangers. And we were, in fact, commanded by His Majesty the King that we need to be careful about our digital transformation journey, where while we are very quick to adopt digital identities, we have to be careful that we do not undermine the privacy of our citizens, which is a constitutional right, and therefore we needed to look for something better, and there were rather best practices in the private sector. A lot of work done in terms of decentralized, self-sovereign identity, and that's how we actually started this initiative to ensure that data that is there in government agencies does not in some way invariably undermine the privacy of individuals, especially through consolidation. And that's why we went for a self-sovereign identity. I think with this, we also have the opportunity to collect data from citizens. I think Sneha was talking about the idea of collecting data at a village level. I mean, we are moving towards an ecosystem where most data that is important for individuals will belong to individuals, and therein, rather than having to pull it from central repositories in government, you actually take the approach where whoever wants to
said, got the best from the other pioneers in this area, including India and Singapore, and then implemented. So the basic infrastructure is now there. The second question really that comes arising from this is some of the challenges of the privacy protection and the implementation of software or algorithms such as the global Creative Commons to integrate, based on this infrastructure. That is a huge challenge. Now, John, I'd like you to start, thinking about, how you would, from your experience in the United Kingdom, there is a very practical issue that I have, that for emerging markets doing this. De facto, we in emerging markets and everybody else around the world, if anybody who uses, your smart iPhone would have given your privacy rights to Google or whoever it is already. And that is in a private the database. And, so if trying to build, a separate system, how does that, conflict work from your perspective in your experience?
It's a great question, Andrew. So just to preface that, in the UK, I was fortunate to secure the contract to establish the UK government's Centre for Data and Analytics for the agri-food sector. And in establishing that, privacy of data was paramount. And it's the same with the Creative Commons. I think control over data, I think ownership of data is a complicated concept, but control over data is really what people want. And it needs to be made incredibly simple. And the defaults should always be to benefit the user. And that's, of course, the exact opposite of what happens. I mean, no human being can understand the privacy contract that you click OK to on Facebook. You just do it because you like Facebook, right? You don't think hard enough about the consequences of that. I've heard the perspective that privacy has essentially already evaporated in the West, that there is no such thing as privacy, and that may or may not be a good thing. One of the issues that I think is particularly important when we're thinking about the global Creative Commons as part of an ecosystem is to beware of digital colonialization. We've heard a lot about how Bhutan has a unique offering to the rest of the world and can benefit from insights from capitalism as well, what went right, what didn't go right. So there's that gateway in the mindfulness city that I've become obsessed with is a really, really interesting and I think incredibly difficult thing to manage carefully, and we'll need a lot of foresight. AI is very dominated by data from the West. And so if you just ask a question, if you're trying to find a solution in Bhutan to something that you're trying to figure out, and you use ChatGPT, you'll mostly get the Western perspective on that. And so I think it's important that we maintain the provenance of knowledge and that we understand the provenance of knowledge and that provenance is part of the AI system. And of course that knowledge and provenance of that knowledge is somehow controlled. and monetized, actually, in the way that is beginning to emerge with AI in America. There are now contracts being established with artists and AI engines that use their content to create new content on the AI platform. So there's a beginning of a realization that there's some responsibility to the originators of the knowledge, that they should be recompensed for that. And I think this is a way that we could monetize some of the knowledge in Bhutan, but it needs to be carefully managed. So beware digital colonialization. The key point that I think I want to make, and I'm aware of time, Andrew, learning by doing, which I think we all agree is a great idea, and bottom up is a great idea. You cannot learn by doing, is that right? Anyway, you cannot learn by doing unless you measure the consequence. So you do something, and then something happens that you hope is what you intended to happen. 90% of the time it won't be. But you need to know that what you intend, what actually happened, and you need to know that what you want is what you wanted to happen looks like, and then iterate towards that, which means you need very good data infrastructure to manage that learning by doing approach. And as I explained earlier, if you want to accelerate that process, you need to share that knowledge across all of the communities in Bhutan that are undertaking transformation. Sorry, that was maybe a longer answer than you'd hoped for.
The issue that I think has come up is really this now. John has mentioned the issue of data colonization. Okay, I put it as simply as possible. We have built in this country and in many other countries digital public infrastructure. But the infrastructure in the internet has already been built. And so in a sense, you're fighting with the existing private infrastructure versus public infrastructure, okay? And in a sense, the data of the private sector, of the public, has already been given to the private infrastructure guys. So how do we ensure that we're usage? Because you want to use the domestic public infrastructure for data integrity, data privacy, and compliance with national law. That's very clear. But your citizens have already clicked, use Google or Facebook or whatever, that data's gone, right? Now, the problem with the colonization issue is the domestic public infrastructure has self-sovereignty, and that everybody agrees with. But de facto, you've signed it away when you click use Google, okay? Right? Now, that colonization means what? It means not only have you given your data free in exchange for some free goods, of course, but anytime you want to use it, you will be charged for it. So to a large extent, this country, including many other emerging markets, are paying for their own data from these private platforms, okay? Which is a real issue. And then if your own startups want to build that data infrastructure services for your own country, you pay for it. So, let me now pose these questions to Sneha, since she's thought a lot about One Earth balance sheet and some of these issues. I'm really testing her.
No, I fully agree with this. And I think one of the things that we are exploring while we are building this app to collect data at the village level is that how the ownership of this data can be transferred to the villages themselves, to the communities themselves. And whenever, if this data is being utilized for any commercial purpose, how the incentives of that can be passed on to the communities. So the data that we contribute right now to either Google, Facebook, or Instagram, it is being monetized, right? But as contributors of data, we don't get benefits out of that to us at all. And I think in the AI landscape, when ChatGPT was built, I think they faced a lot of lawsuits because of this, because they scraped data from internet and made a lot of money, but the contributors were not, the benefits didn't flow to the contributors of data. So I think this is very important, that if we build digital infrastructure, we need to see that how the benefits and the ownership of data can remain with the communities. And for this, one feature that we are integrating is the consent layer, where the communities decide whom they want to share the data with, and they have complete freedom whether they want to share this data for any commercial purposes or not. If it is being shared for the commercial purpose, then they will be the benefits would trickle down to them.
I hope you don't mind me, trying to drill deep into this question, because I see this from an emerging market perspective. The giants will do whatever they're doing. We smaller, I come from Malaysia, face the same problem, all right? We have two fundamental problems. Even if we were to build this data infrastructure, and we would like to encourage our young people to do, or older people to do the startups, okay? Number one, they will have problems if they have to pay for the data to these big boys, number one, right? And number two, they already have a disadvantage because they are much less privileged in terms of access to top universities, etc., right? And then the third issue is that, so somebody has to start this for the national ecosystem, digital ecosystem. Because, the big boys won't do it, right? They won't do it without some monetary return. Okay, so if we are doing the one-off balance sheet issue, the village database issue, you have that issue. Then on top of that, you have another complication, because most of our users are not that sophisticated. The very fact that somebody in the village uses, I won't mention particular names, any LLMs, and they use their data and grant access of that data to the LLM, your data's gone completely. So these are very real issues, and I would like, the panelists to comment on this, see how we can find a way out of this. Maybe Dasho, would you have any thoughts about this?
So I think we need a wide variety of data, and I think the information that is provided to the major social media players out there are possibly one aspect of human living, but not necessarily everything. And I think particularly when we talk about AI, we need to be, the more data that you can get, the rich sources, diverse sources, the better the results that you can get from AI. So I don't have a solution to your answer, but I think, to your question, but I think all is not lost. Countries have sovereignty over a lot of data that is authenticated, that belongs in public repositories, and many countries are looking at making that data available to entrepreneurs, innovators locally, so that they can actually leverage that, right? I think in the end, it's possibly a negotiation that will probably need to happen, right? To get access to universal, or rather near access to holistic data that will help improve the AI. I'm not a lawyer nor an economist, so I can't really talk to, and particularly as a small nation, use those tools, to push back.
So there's a kind of a is it working? Yeah. Can you hear me? Just can't hear me. There's a fine line to walk along between making data open and available for entrepreneurs and for ensuring that the providers of that data are appropriately rewarded for sharing. And that might not necessarily be a monetary reward, but some acknowledgement, an acceptable acknowledgement of that. And there are open data codes of conduct and some attempt at navigating that fine line. Data on its own has no value. It's what you do with the data that has value. And in order to innovate and do clever things, and things that literally we cannot imagine right now, that data has to be accessible and we have to be able to experiment with it. So I'm not enough of a technical expert, and I know there are people in the audience who are, and maybe we can follow that up in the discussion, but there are technical means to follow the provenance of data. So we can always tell where the data has come from. So in principle, through that kind of tokenization, it should be possible to reward the providers of the data in an appropriate manner.
Thank you, John. Snehal, do you want, or shall we open it up to some technical experts, on the floor, who may have some views on this?
I just want to add one point, that just the tech infrastructure alone cannot solve all the problems. We need even the digital literacy programs, which teaches this to the communities and the villages, what the effects are of the, when they share data with LLMs or with any other companies, what those effects are. As Chime was mentioning, that now the digital tools and platforms are so easily available to the communities, but there is so little knowledge to them on how to best benefit from them, and also how to remain cautious about the scams that can happen, right? So I think digital literacy has to accompany, and I think Bhutan has already rolled out their digital literacy training program for all the villages in the country, and I think that's again a great step ahead. Yeah.
John, just a quick point. I'm going to mention you actually, Daniel, because you said earlier in the meeting that we need that law needs to be more responsive and agile in a sense. And I wanted to make the point, I'll just build on what Sneha's already said, that we need the frameworks in place that can move fast enough to protect the rights of people. What's happening with AI right now is it's not just AI actually, it's the social media in general. It is a global experiment that's being done on people by very rich companies. If I had, as a scientist, had tried to study the effects of social media by inventing social media, I would not get it past ethics, right? But somehow, companies are able to do this experiment on the entire planetary population, and I think the results are, maybe it's not such a great idea, and things need to be different. But the legal frameworks, in my view, take too long to catch up. And the big companies exploit that delay. So they make huge amounts of money whilst the law makes up its mind about whether this can be done or not. And I appreciate that these things do take time, but again, a learning by doing approach, inevitably we will make mistakes and we will do things that need to be legislated against, and we need a framework that is responsive enough for that.
If Daniel, a microphone, is it available? And I think the young lady at the back also needs a microphone.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate you, Andrew, and the panel for taking on this subject, because it actually touches on one of the most profound debates in the early 21st century, which is the sovereignty of data. And in fact, we are just scratching the surface of this global debate. And I'm obviously with you, John, on the need for the law to play catch-up. But I do think we have existing tools that can combat this business of data monopolization by big tech, by the big players, at the expense of individuals, companies, small countries, etc. And I think the way forward is actually demonstrated by Taylor Swift. And this is interesting because I'll make full disclosure now. I work with Universal Music Hotels, which is a component of the biggest music company in the entire world. That's Universal Music, which has 9 out of 10 of the top recording artists in the world, right? So it's a very big player. And data, we know, is the new oil or the new gold. Everybody knows that. But how do you protect it? And the answer lies in intellectual property. And this is an area which my wife Denise knows far better than I do as an IP lawyer. But I'll venture into this territory from what I know and have done over the last 5 years. So you take Taylor Swift as an example. She's just an individual. Of course, the biggest name in the music world. She pushed back. She pushed back by saying, actually, I can re-record my songs, and I own them. So you can't say, because I signed some contract umpteen years ago, and my IP is now owned forever by some music company, some giant. Therefore, I've lost essentially my life's work. She said, I'm going to do it. And she re-recorded. And her re-recordings are an assertion of her personal sovereignty over her own creation. Now, if one individual, albeit a very, very powerful individual, like Taylor Swift can do this, how much more can a sovereign state do? There are only 196 sovereign states members of the United Nations. Bhutan clearly is a sovereign state, a member of the UN. How much more can Bhutan do? Essentially, the data which is collected in the villages, etc., belong to the people, the originators or creators of that data. And the existing tools of intellectual property protection, which is specifically a legal tool, an aspect of the common law, the English common law, which we kind of share as a global heritage, if you like. So Hong Kong is a common law jurisdiction, we know that. So we can use that tool, intellectual property, to assert our own rights. We do not have to wait until some framework emerges from the UN or some other body, supranational body to protect us. I think that's too late. But we do not have to, roll over and play dead. We are masters of our own destinies. We have agency. Bhutan has agency. Bhutan can take the lead in this. Bhutan can use the UN as a platform to assert this. Bhutan can use WIPO, WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, which is based in the UN, as a platform. I don't know whether Bhutan is a member of WIPO, Singapore is a member of WIPO, Hong Kong is a member of WIPO, etc. We can use these platforms to protect ourselves. So we do not have to wring our hands and say, woe is me, it's all lost. It's not like that. Because this battle, or the war, if you like, is only just beginning. Taylor Swift showed us the way. She's not the only one. There are others. And therefore, I do not counsel despair. I actually think we are on the cusp of a major seismic change in the way the world looks at data. And data is actually the property of the creators. In other words, in Bhutan's case, the people of Bhutan.
Thank you, Daniel. That's very hopeful and constructive. Out of what I had, put it this way, a little despair, that we are struggling against giants who dominate us. But you have given us the way, and I think if we all work together, hopefully we'll find a way out of this. The young lady at the back.
Pem Sering again. I just want to take it down from the macro level that Daniel took it to and take it to a more practical question I had, and it feels a little bit minor now in the context of all that was just said. It's a question that I've had in terms of my personal feelings with the use of all of these LLMs and AI and all of that, right? Because I was in Malaysia recently, and I know that the government there has sort of approved the usage of Gemini or one of these LLMs, at the government level, right? I mean, across the bureaucracy. So it's a sort of state. I think it's one of the first, states taking that, into their day-to-day. Of course, people pose questions about, privacy and all of that at the state secrets level, but that's another topic. But even on the sort of personal level, I see more and more people, we hear about the challenges that, university professors or school teachers are facing with, the use by students, right? And on the other hand, there's this sort of, this ideology being pushed that if you don't learn to use these systems, you'll be left behind. You will be antiquated before, too long. Now, I personally, I like to write, I like to read, I like to do all of this, in a very sort of analog way. I like to send postcards, I like to write letters, right? But that's already sort of antiquated in a sense. I struggle with the use of AI also from a climate perspective, because, recently they said, if you ask ChatGPT or whatever else you do to write a 100-word email for you, that's the equivalent of pouring out this entire bottle of water and just, throwing it out there, right? Now, we may be in a water-rich country, is what one thinks, more of that coming later, but it's you think of drought-ridden countries, and then there's concerns there. You think of California, right, and the struggles they have with drought and all that. So how does one deal with this dichotomy in a sense? Because it's something that bugs me on the daily, and I've just purchased a phone that now doesn't give me the choice of opting out of using AI, and so it's challenging. So yeah, how should we go about dealing with that in this new generation, especially for the younger generation that just has to sort of get to grips with this?
Maybe John, I think you've already quoted Stuart Kaufman. We can't control that. I mean, that's my reaction, but how would you think about it?
I just want to make sure I understand the question.
Oh, it's okay.
Hello?
Oh, yeah, all right.
Just to make sure I understand the question, there was a question around the energy consumption that's involved in AI, and people just use it for no purpose, trivial reasons, but one image uses the same charge as an entire iPhone. And then the second thing is, how do you manage its use in terms of privacy of information, but also provenance of the knowledge? So a student, for example, that writes their essay using ChatGPT hasn't used their own knowledge, right? Is that right? Is that?
Yes, and then there's also, I guess, the question of, in the way that you could be a conscientious objector in certain jurisdictions, to not participate in wars or whatever. Here, it seems the sort of running ideology is that if you don't learn how to use these systems, then you will be left behind, And for me personally, I've tried to resist the usage of AI or whatever, but there is a struggle.
So my advice to my students is that, of course, they should use it, and my kids, of course, they should use it as a tool. But like every other tool, it has its uses and misuses, and it's not intelligent, right? It gives the illusion of intelligence, but it's not intelligent. So anything that comes out of an AI is just the point zero in time, and then you have to do a whole bunch of checks and elaborations, and you have to work with it, right? It's not the finished product. It might stimulate your thinking, but it's not the finished product. We had the same issue in universities with Wikipedia. You know, students would use Wikipedia as a citation, and you say, that's not a citation. That's where you make a start, right? And at the end of the day, you need to find the most reliable sources of information. So in terms of whether you can opt in or opt out of use, that would be a personal choice. I agree that some devices don't allow you to have that choice, and that seems wrong. And that's something that maybe for another discussion. The energy consumption side of things is a massive, 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 massive issue. And I think at some point, that has to be, the impact of that, in terms of the climate impact, has to be costed in properly. And I think that will then impact on the use and how frequently people might use it without thinking first.
Okay, in the interest of time, Dasho has the last word.
I just wanted to share that I think we cannot generalize all AI. You know, I think there are LLMs that generate text based on probability and, you know, and all of that, but that doesn't constitute all AI. We have AI that is inventing new materials, that is changing the possibility and productivity of society at large, the possibility of inventing medicine treatment that can you know, transform the lives of everyone. So I think and then of course, not to say that LLMs are bad, because LLMs provide productivity as well, and it is a distillation of the knowledge that is currently available, and I think we need to think about how we can use that efficiently. I think the issue of energy is definitely a matter of concern now, but as all inventions or technology, it goes through iterations, right? I mean, I think everyone here must have heard about the DeepSeek moment in terms of the significant reduction in energy needed to train an equivalent model. And my belief is that because the value that is being provided, there will be significant interest in this area, and there seems to be work already going on in terms of developing, besides different types of silicon, you know, digital chips versus analog chips that can significantly reduce the energy required to be able to generate the same amount of, you know, generated content. I want to avoid using intelligence, but what is intelligence? Anyway, I think AI, like any tool, has the possibility of transforming lives in terms of productivity, in terms of usefulness to society, and at the same time, it has the potential of you know, destruction, right? So I think as a society, we need to think about it, and we need to make sure that we put in the guardrails that ensure that this technology evolves in a manner that benefits society and doesn't destroy it in the process. Thanks.
Ashok, you know, this panel has demonstrated why human intelligence cannot yet be replaced. If AI can replace us all, We can just have some agentic AI, images of all four of us, images of all of you, then the AI will be talking to the AI, and we don't need this conference at all. On that, joke, let's stop here. We want to thank the wisdom of Dasho, John and Sneha, and we'll break earlier for tea because we have a very full schedule, and several ministers are coming to close this convention. Thank you. Thank you, Dasho.
Thank you, the panel and the panelists and moderators. I planned not to stop for tea. I thought I will take it like yesterday, where the session continues and the tea is served. But we have 3 ministers on the way, so maybe while we wait for the 3 ministers, we'll take our tea. But 15 minutes, whether the minister are here or in 15 minutes or not, we'll begin session in 15 minutes. It's 3:26, so 15 minutes from now, please be back. Thank you.
saka bidi womesa tari sa bomenga got me immune slow the chick let me be your guiding star catch you if you ever fall chito sa miru sada nam gibana kinga you don't want that need don't worry show chin yegi tamasha
점속이 소식해라도 믿도 나나 니기니 럼게라쇼 케라미사 가지나 하마고루 두브라둡사 다리 보치렌 루뚝 Curser marjaya churai da visa karle shumeru ma ben chebesa horai majo 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 me chiragi luten chiragi tonale majo 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 me chiragi ditse chiragi mitsele majo 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 me chiragi ditse chiragi mitsele
옮기고는 하이 샘좀 싱큼내미 랩좀 내라 랩에 니 따위미 까치라 랩에 주동비님 내님 장가야 치님이 바치라 생카 덴디라 덴메야 따로발로루 치자비제라 생카 덴메 치게 가슴 통다 생매라워 달림이 부모치게 라비제리 덮친 동안 가슴 템친 데니삼 야도 마베랄리 이루 다리 부모치다 대비님 나 생매 옌디랄리 부모치게 라비제리 덮친 가슴 템친 Pudusan, pudusan, 주통다, 주통다, 라워미바 분위기 샘디 달록질록지 다디디로 신가는 pudusan, 더 pudusan, 주통다, 주통다, 라워미바 분위기 샘디 달록질록지 다루시니 미분이산 telepabi tu hingang lu jionga jisem ki sawi santam nga lu sheonga jedam ti tending ada ten cha deonga ni kawi kum ni ni lam nagi aji chera impesa ni sendu kawa jemi chera impesa ni du hinagi natam chera impesa ni bumo che ni du he debe berami ni ru dari bumo chegelap tin show chin sema dem berami ta bumo chegelap jene tomchin kazom temchin ni du he no me sio me bumo cheda pama tabedeni mi da seme chene zumpeita bumo chegelap jene tomchin kazom temchin Denisam pudosa pudosa chutomda chutomda rawamiba bunigi semdi talukchi tadi tero shinkamma pudosa the pudosa chutomda chutomda rawamiba bunigi semdi talukchi tarusini mi bunisam pudosa the pudosa pudosa bunigi sem pudosa pudosa chutomda chutomda rawamiba bunigi semdi talukchi tadi tero shinkamma pudosa pudosa chutomda chutomda rawamiba bunigi semdi talukchi tarusini mi bunisam 이루다리 부모치기 가슴 통다 샘매라 달림이 부모치기 라비제리 덮친 붕어 Chebele badi won't be caught in the cheyum sole badi won't me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start our final leg of the conference. Please return to your seats. Feel free to carry your tea and snacks and coffee to your table. We have the table for that purpose. Organizing team, if you can usher the guests back to their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. I can still see many of you at the tea stand. Please come back to your seats. Tarayana and organizing team, please usher our participants back to their seats. Otherwise, I will not mind keeping you all again here till 6. Your Excellencies, we have Honorable Minister of Infrastructure and Transport, Limpo Chandra Bahadur. We have Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Forest, Limpo, I forgot Limpo's name now. I panicked. We have the Minister of Agriculture and Forest, and we have our Home Minister, Limpo Tsering, here joining us. Are we all settled now? Okay, for the final session, I'll be the strict school principal. So please, let's have the focus going on. We're talking about mindful, the mind and all, so let's be in the present and end this conference on a high note. Your Excellencies, thank you so much for taking the time for joining us. I saw the agriculture limbo at the watermelon festival. So hope that was a wonderful experience. La. All right, so we'll continue now. We have two panels to go. We move into a vital panel on mobilizing finance for technology, advocacy, and capacity building, because whatever we talk about, we may talk about a lot of concepts and ideas and philosophy wouldn't work without the necessary finance. So the next session will explore innovative financial tools like climate finance, carbon credit, blended capital, and impact investing. And the panel will discuss how these can fund the systems needed to embed cross-national happiness principles deeply into governance and development. So to moderate this panel, I would like to invite on the stage Tasho Senchunobu. Tasho has a wide CV. I did not know which ones to put, so I'll just say that at his peak, Tasho served as the secretary for the erstwhile National Environment Commission Secretariat and the erstwhile Ministry of Works and Human Settlement. Tasho, now the floor is yours.
Dr. Ma here, Dr. Harry, next here, Chimi, yeah. So I'm going to sit in the middle. I want to be happy, and I wanted to really look into this conversation. Let me recall, yesterday Andrew said, there is knowledge, there is money. How can you bring to help Bhutan? But I thought best thing I can do is sit here on my right with the banker, on my left with the investor, and to science knowledge on the extreme point. So I'm myself very comfortable. Now, we did agree yesterday on how we are going to proceed today's session. So we said each speaker will take around 5 to 6 minutes. That makes around 20 minutes, I would assume. And to make our audience happy, we are giving you 25 minutes to have a direct conversation with my eminent speakers here. So please do take this advantage. First, allow me to go straight to Chimi. You have 5 minutes to go.
First of all, very good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests. Very good afternoon. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Tarayana Foundation, Georgetown Institute of Advanced Studies for giving this opportunity to talk about Bhutan and carbon market. But before that, let me briefly touch upon Paris Agreement, climate finance, and then I'll come to carbon market. Because without understanding Paris Agreement, without knowing Paris Agreement, without knowing climate finance, we are not going to learn about, we are not going to actually educate ourselves about carbon market. And I'll be talking about carbon market from the context of Bhutan. Bhutan's unique national circumstances are being taken care of. So, Paris Agreement in 2015, global leaders came together. And then they have discussed, negotiated, and decided on a long-term temperature goal to limit that global temperature rise to well below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And in order for do that, in order for countries to achieve that, of course, like different countries will respond differently. For developed country, they have the resources, they have the capacity, they have the finance to reach that goal. And for developing countries like Bhutan, least developed countries, we don't have resources and capacity. So for that, around same time, they have discussed, negotiated, and then agreed on a climate finance call to mobilize $100 billion by 2020. Last year, we call it a finance call. There we have discussed about the climate finance, new collective quantified climate finance call. So the report says they have not just achieved, in fact, they have overachieved. Personally, for me, that's a blatant lie. And last year, what happened was, since it was a climate finance call, UN Climate Conference, they have set a new collective quantified goal. Today, if you look at the reports, the climate finance recommend for the developing countries and the least developed countries is $1.5 trillion by 2035 annually. And last year, global communities agreed $300 billion to be mobilized by 2035. So now, where does that $1.3 trillion will come from? So let's say we get first, it will be from the bilateral contributions, for example, like developed countries contributing to developing countries, and then multilateral, for example, like MDBs, World Bank, ADBs, and then like climate finance facilities like GCF, GEF, loss and damage fund, so on and so forth. And the next bigger chunk of the finance will come from private sector. That's where the mechanisms such as carbon markets is going to play a greater role to mobilize and also to unlock potentials of private sector financing of the climate actions. So in case of Bhutan, so let's look at Bhutan. We have been talking about a lot of good things about environmentalism. Our country is not just carbon neutral, we are carbon negative. Our constitution, we take it for granted, 60% of our trees are constitutionally protected. You look at any other constitution, you'll never find such kind of a strong, dedicated constitution in the world. Protected areas, more than 50% of our countries is protected area. So we talk a lot of good things about the environmentalism, sustainability, so on and so forth. But what we are getting out of it, we need to monetize. The key is we need to monetize what we have been doing so far, And then the next question is the market mechanism that Bhutan has been trying to tap into. Last year in Baku, after 9 years of negotiation, the market mechanism, Article 6, which is also known as International Carbon Market Mechanism, concluded. Now it's time for us to operationalize it. In case of Bhutan, I'm proud to say that we are top 20 countries globally ready to participate, infrastructure-wise, policy-wise. What we have done? We have a carbon market rules, carbon market policy, that sets the carbon asset development process within Bhutan. We have national carbon registry. In fact, this is the fundamental infrastructure that will ensure transparency and the credibility and traceability of the carbon credits. So I think I have just 1 minute left. Let me conclude with this note. I can discuss about some of the structural barriers, some of the institutional barriers, and also some of the issues regarding climate finance and carbon market. I can talk about that. We have discussed about Bhutan's forests being not able to monetize. We cannot monetize considering current structure. I can come to that. But I want to conclude with the note that we have done fair share of what world has asked us to do. If you look at the emission data of Bhutan, we are carbon negative by 9.7 million tons. If you do a math, currently carbon markets in the Article 6 fetch around $20 to $25. Let's say conservatively $10 multiplied by 9.7. Annually, we are contributing to the global mitigation effort freely, no returns, $100 million. No developed countries would have contributed to $100 million annually without return, sure. So that 100 million, if it translates to economic opportunity, we would have constructing a hydropower size of Dagashu hydropower project. So with that note, I would like to conclude here that we have done enough, and it's time for us to advocate to the international community to show us the money. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. So I'm just starting with the knowledge and science. So we have just heard from Chimi. Can I go to Michael? And I'm sure you will be talking mostly on the forest sequestration components. Thank you, Michael. 5 minutes.
I'd like to thank Andrew and John for their very kind invitation. I come from a place where the science, the law, and the finance misses out the ingredient of soul. And what I've learned in the last 2 days is that may be the biggest contribution you have yet to make. And we should all start from a place where we're in debt. We're in debt to nature. And there is a liability that can only really be defined scientifically. And we have the science-based targets approach for that. We have the World Resource Institute greenhouse gas risk assessment approach. We've got hundreds of different protocols, codes, and frameworks that, quite frankly, are failing markets. The ETS schemes, the cap and trade schemes set up by governments for emissions trading are not working. They are, at best, issuing permission certificates to pollute to companies like Tesla, who make $4 billion a year out of their $5 billion profit from trading certificates given to them by the government to sell them to polluting companies. The voluntary carbon market hasn't actually transacted anything of virtue. So if we're looking as a country such as Bhutan into the markets to try and find value for the surplus that you state that you have, you are not going to find long-term value there, and there will be no happiness if it is traded away. So what I would urge is a new approach which Andrew has already set the foundations. So within the context of the defined happiness approach that you have, the One Earth balance sheet that you can adopt, with the instruments that have been proposed by the social stock exchange, in identifying existing instruments you've already built within the carbon market here. You have a self-sovereign identity. You have a sovereign fund, you have token. You've completed a transaction under Article 6 with Singapore for water, and that has established clear value and clear sovereign asset in long term. But I think we need a framework that also looks at the liabilities that exist from the past and in the present, and how the assets that are going to be built into the future are for the benefit of the next 7 generations, for their happiness. And so none of the market structures that exist will serve you well. Now, the ETS trade program will not help. And I think they are going to be radically reformed anyway, given the US pulling out of the UN system as it relates to carbon markets. With the EPA now completely beholden to oil and gas interest, that is not going to serve us well. The state of the political economy in the US is that the best they can do is put up tariffs, and that a foreign pollution tax act has been promulgated in the Senate and will make its way to Congress. So what I would urge is partnership with your neighboring countries, partnership around the definition and stock take of where your assets and liabilities are, and move forward with pride that you can define a soul-bound token that instantiates both the liabilities and assets that exist in this country and how you're going to grow them on a One Earth balance sheet.
Thank you, Michael. Keeping on time, well said. Now I want to turn to Harry. I think you have heard from him, his investment in parks. I think he has more to share. Harry, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tasho. Again, I'm very proud to be here, and Michael has presented a very sobering, and he's representing reality. Having said that, at the moment, we don't have a lot of alternatives. And how we make use of the few alternatives, as problematic as they may be, they're worth pursuing. And what I'd like to present to you is what we have done since we leveraged off the habitat and the UNESCO Mannan Biosphere. Since that time, we have now protected close to 350,000 hectares of primary forest in Malaysia. I'll clarify that in a minute as to what I mean by a protected area. In 2023, in partnership with the Crown Prince of the state of Pahang in Malaysia, we launched the first tiger reserve in Malaysia. And in this context, we protected 134,000 hectares. But in reality, what we're looking at is a protected area of over 650,000 hectares, because it is abutting the national park. Unique in this sense is that the Tiger Reserve not only seeks to protect and enhance the critically endangered Malayan tiger, the Tiger Reserve is actually the source of almost 30% of fresh water for the southern part of Malaysia. So there's a lot of contiguous issues that play into this. Now, it is a protected area, but we have negotiated a management contract. Tiger reserves are unique. We had the great benefit of using India as an example, and India has been very responsive to Malaysia in providing assistance, technology, good practices, all of which we have employed. So the next question comes up is, how do you finance a tiger reserve? And that responsibility lies on us who hold the management rights. So what we've done is raised philanthropic funding. So over the past 18 months, we have raised $35 million to manage the park, which is wonderful. That gives us enough time to manage the park for approximately 10 years. However, in reality, we would never have been able to raise the funding if we did not identify income sources that would replace philanthropic sources. So through that, what we have identified is a carbon market, because we have degraded areas within the Tiger Reserve, agroforestry, and of course working with the indigenous communities. Right? And through that, we're able to generate carbon income, agroforestry income, and ecotourism income. Yep. Okay, moving on from that is the second project, which is a pure for-profit project, and that is a carbon project. And it's a 110,000 hectare peat swamp. The reason I call it a protected area is that over our 60-year lease, we are doing everything that we have to do in order to qualify for the trading of carbon credits, meaning we have to either reforest, introduce agroforestry, work with local social communities, protect the biodiversity. It's a profit-generating operation, but between the Crown Prince and my family office, we have pledged that 60% of all revenues will be redeployed back to our mission, which is the environment, education, and heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Now, I want to turn to Dr. Ma, looking for some bankable projects. Dr. Ma, your floor is yours.
Maybe this one. Yeah, thank you very much, Dasha, and I should thank Andrew for bringing me here, my first trip to Bhutan, to discuss this very interesting concept of gross national happiness, and now coming to the financing the happiness part, which is a topic that I've been working on for the last 11 years. I was in the banking sector as an economist for 20 plus years until 2014, when I joined the Chinese Central Bank as a chief economist. So from then, I began to lead the drafting of the Chinese green finance policy. And since then, I think it's now about 10 years, China has developed the largest green lending market and the largest green bond market. The outstanding amounts of green loans and green bonds in China is 43 trillion RMB, which is close to $6 trillion US. And these financial instruments fueled the massive growth of renewable energy, electric vehicle, and all the green stuff. Now, for smaller developing countries, I think the key is not necessary to develop your complete local green financial system. It's too complex. It involves taxonomy, disclosure, and all kind of products and incentives and so on. As Chimi just said, you need to utilize international money, especially private sector money. Now, for doing that, because the majority of private sector money coming from other countries to Bhutan will be looking for bankable projects. They need to get the principal back and some return. So bankability becomes the key. I've been seeing a lot of developing countries presenting projects, 90% of which are not bankable. They are green, right? They help environment to reduce emission, reduce pollution, but they're not bankable. They don't have return. And let me give you just one example of how we actually develop a bankable project, which is seemingly unbankable in China. That's we grow grass on the desert in the Mongolia. Growing grass itself doesn't make any money, right? It becomes a charity project, and China doesn't have that much of money growing grass on the vast in the desert land. But we did three things to generate income. Number one, we put solar panel on the grass, which is on top of the desert. Solar can make money because sell electricity. Secondly, we raise chicken under the solar panel. We can sell the chicken meat, second income. Thirdly, we grow the Chinese herbs, which is high value added agro-business. So three income, and together potentially carbon credit, because growing grass on desert can generate carbon reduction, yeah? So four incomes, which makes the project very, very bankable. A lot of private sector money can come in. Now, there are many, many other areas we can do the same thing. For example, I had a little example of jute, which is a plantation, right? I think could be planted here, and that can be used as a raw material to produce packaging material that replace plastics. And that itself is environmentally friendly and may potentially generate some carbon credit as well. So these are the type of ideas we need in designing projects for Bhutan, whether it's agriculture or forestry or even tourism. On the tourism side, let me give you one example of what I did in East Timor. I went there last year and helping them developing the idea of bringing Chinese tourists there. We probably can schedule something to bring 1 million Chinese tourists, which is 1% of Chinese outbound tourism, to the island country. And then all the projects in infrastructure related to tourism become bankable, because these tourists will pay for the hotel, they pay the airport, they pay the electricity, they pay the water. And by doing so, we can make a lot of seemingly unbankable projects bankable. So I do hope that we can have the opportunity to explore with our ministers, with Chimo and others, what are the bankable projects here that can be utilizing external money, including China financing, and potentially Hong Kong, Macau with a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you so much for keeping to the time. Now, floor is yours. We are opening for questions, reactions, observations from the distinguished participants. Thank you. Anyone up? Daniel.
May I just build on what Dr. Marjun has just said and also answer directly Dorji's question on where's the money? Show me the color of the money, which is a very pertinent question. And I'd like to focus on just one aspect, which is carbon trading. Now, in fact, when I was invited to this conference, I had prepared a presentation electronically on carbon trading, noting the synergies between Bhutan as a carbon negative economy and China, which is the complete opposite. And we've heard some figures. I think we've heard some figures about the total trading value last year, which is 43 billion RMB, which is about 6 billion US. And this is exactly the figure that I have from my sources. Now, why do I mention this and how do we translate it into money, income, something meaningful, impactful for Bhutan and Bhutan's economy? Carbon trading started in China in the year 2008 in Tianjin. China is way ahead of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is way behind. But the reason why China started carbon trading in Tianjin in 2008 is because China is the last remaining manufacturing superpower. And in terms of its practices, there are a lot of issues that have arisen which need addressing and balancing in terms of the carbon footprint and in terms of the global balance. So in 2009, the second carbon market started in Beijing. In 2010, the third carbon trading market started in Shanghai. Today, there are 8 different regional carbon markets all over China. There is a national carbon market, which started in the year 2023, but they're all fragmented. There's now a policy which we in Hong Kong, that is Financial Services Development Council, the hat I'm wearing temporarily now, proposed to the central government, and the central government agreed to use Hong Kong as the consolidator for carbon trading in terms of interfacing with the external world. We were looking at Indonesia, we're looking at the European Union, but the synergies between Bhutan and China are immense. And because of Hong Kong's regulatory transparency and Hong Kong's market depths, it is thought that Hong Kong is the best place to do this. Now, I'm not going to take up more time because this is a very technical and deep issue. I'm happy to share the details offline, and I'm happy to share my electronic presentation, but there are enormous opportunities, economic, financial opportunities for Bhutan using its massive carbon credits, because Bhutan is a carbon sink vis-a-vis China.
Thank you very much. Okay, Pen Sring at the back. I like to really hear precise and concise questions, and even the comments also. Let's leave it to that. Pen, please.
This is, I guess, targeted at something Chimi alluded to earlier. So I'll be very, I'll say who I'm hoping to hear from. This is regarding this question of reforestation versus the existing coverage, let's say, that Bhutan has, right? At COP, at the various COPs now, we have encountered this ridiculous situation where countries like Bhutan that have 60 or 70% of forest coverage are not being recognized for it, let alone rewarded. And yet, of course, it's because the developed world is writing the rules, right? But they're talking about providing credits for reforestation. Now, this seems to incentivize us, let's say in Bhutan, to gut all our forests and then plant trees again. But the world, of course, can't afford it. So how do we course correct this ridiculous situation?
Thank you. Michael, you want to respond or you don't want? Okay.
I identify your frustration. Unfortunately, the science says that for a temporary removal from forestry or nature-based, whether it's mangrove or peat it has to be additional. And that's the biggest hurdle that you need to overcome. It seems to me that the statistics that were shared, we've lost some 10, 15, 20% over the last decade here through the addition of roads or the clearing for farming or urban areas. So there was a natural attrition of that natural forest. With timber management, you can clear what would have been native forest and reforest it, and yes, be eligible for those new high integrity additional permanent forests. And it's not a bad thing to cull old forest, because the nature of the life cycle of a tree is that the sequestration is stored in the roots and the biomass in the soil. And by cutting some of the trees selectively through that forest, you can renew it. And the renewal of that permanent forest is a permanent credit. And so your forestry management methods need to adapt to that new model.
In our, please, briefly, yes.
Now, this is a hugely complex issue, which I don't think anyone can explain within 1 minute, but just to say, I've been sitting on the board of ICVCM, Integrity Council of Voluntary Carbon Market, which sets the global standards on voluntary carbon market. And after so many years of studies on how to prevent greenwashing, they do come to the conclusion that the voluntary carbon market is aimed to encourage new efforts to create additional carbon reduction and removal. Now, if it's not new efforts, not additionality, then it should not be counted. The reasons are very complex, I won't explain, right? So there is an international agreement, and there's a reason for that, for the definition. Now, one sentence reaction to Daniel's comment on Hong Kong's role in implementing the Article 6.2. I think, yes, Hong Kong and Macau, they're actually in a better position than mainland China to play international role of connecting the potential carbon credit investors, both domestically within Hong Kong, Macau, and globally, to countries that need the financing.
Thank you for the question, and I would like to maybe discuss around some of the structural issues and barriers, and that's exactly why we are discussing today. So it's so interesting, it's so interesting, like Bhutan have been protecting forest for ages, and now in the market, that market is basically not designed for a country like Bhutan. It's designed for countries like those countries who are actually cutting down the tree and then replantation, and then you're getting a revenue out of it. So ideally, if you look at how the market structures are being designed, it's definitely not designed for countries like Bhutan. And we talk about the additionality issues, right? We talk about the additionality issue. The definition of additionality is the project doesn't actually exist without putting in money for the carbon project. So that's actually the definition of additionality. So that is why we need to think about how we can break through such kind of issue like additionality issues and compensate. When we say like show us the money, that doesn't mean like it's for the charity of Bhutan. We are saying it to partner with us. We are saying to collaborate with us, do project with us, and have your share. So that's what we mean by when we say like show us the money. It's not a charity. Nobody's going to give you money for the free. So responding to your question,
I think they have heard you clearly, exactly. So let me actually give more time for our floor to actually bring that question up. I think there's a lot of issue that will come up so that we can again add to that. So let's hear. Okay.
Thank you very much. The question I have is, with whatever little bit that I've dabbled with raising money or mobilizing funds, one little struggle that I faced is much of the funding which is available is either available for sustainability or it is available for social work. When you look at spirituality, I felt that there's very little understanding of it and very little money that is available for that, particularly when we are not looking at spirituality in the religious terms. So either we have religious funding, which comes for a particular propagation of religion, which is not what we are trying to do. Or then there is social work funding, which says, no, we are not going to give it to religions. So where is spirituality in this entire mobilizing finance?
I mean, that question is well noted. So we are not really qualified to comment or speak on that, question. I think we need to take note of that kind of, propositions that's coming from. Any? Okay, just to break the ice, I mean, let's be very fair. The rules are made by the developed countries. I think that is not really correct in many sense. In the negotiation, in the rule making, we are all party to that. We have our own groups. So if you are not coordinating, collaborating your members, definitely developed countries will dominate because they will drive their own interests. So in particular, I think rule setting that currently is going on, I think, which is a work in progress, Article 6.8, I think these are some of the areas you have an opportunity to engage. So engage, not as a country, but as a group. This is where we are actually looking ahead. And okay, since there are no more coming, again, I give it to Chimi. You wanted to respond to the additionality or deforestation. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to share what we have been doing in terms of monetizing our forest resources in the form of carbon credit, taking price to the amount of carbon dioxide emission that we reduce or remove. So we are, the Department of Forest and Park Services, they are doing one project which is called High Forest, Low Deforestation Projects. So they are currently being registered with the R3 standard to actually create carbon credits. And the initial estimates, which is very conservative, says like for around like backtracking till 2021, it will generate around 1.2 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So I just wanted to inform that there are methodologies and there are standards who actually value such kind of the existing forest as well. And the question is, we have to break through these kind of additionality issues. And of course, like Brazil is doing it. The Brazil have a mechanism where the protected forests are being monetized. Every hectares, not cutting down the trees, you'll be getting $4. And they will be presenting this time in Brazil, Belém Corp. And if there is some positive news, it will be good for us. So there are mechanisms to how to do that. And for a country like Bhutan, we should actually try to make it relevant to Bhutan. And what we have been doing is also through a mechanism, a facility called Bhutan Climate Fund. It's a very broad functions there, but the real intention is to monetize net negative emission of Bhutan and also to aggregate, because Bhutan is small and scale-wise, it's not going to be relevant to international carbon market. So in order for Bhutan to be relevant to the international carbon market, we have a facility called Bhutan Climate Fund, which will aggregate projects, which will also aggregate credits. And it will act as an intermediary selling and purchasing of the carbon credits so that it can be relevant to the rest of the world. And at the same time, the question of gross national happiness, the value-driven development system that we are currently trying to also infuse into the market mechanism. Of course, this ideology-wise is completely different. Through benefit sharing mechanism, His Majesty instructed us to ensure that profits, revenue generated from carbon credits needs to be equally shared to every single individuals of the country. We can do it that. It's just 700,000 of us.
Chimi, let's have some engagements from the floor. Thank you for your insights into happiness. That is what we are working on it. I still want to hear from our distinguished participants and particularly in line with what we are working on it. I mean, Chimi rightly said that we are carbon negative. And our farmers at the field, they are protecting. And what are they really getting it? Nothing. So this is something I think we need to really look into it. But if you have DG, Dr. Pema, thank you.
Okay, I'll be very brief as you have directed. Isn't it time for us to think beyond carbon? Because when you say ecosystems and ecosystem services, I think one thing that matters to all of us is water and the role of forest in creating water, in water capture, regulation, in the hydrological cycle is, I think, so much more important as well. And for upstream countries like Bhutan, conservation of our forest for its function in providing water, the ecosystem service of water, I think is probably more important also, as important. So therefore, I just want to ask Dr. Ma, and also Michael, whether we could actually explore the possibility of financing the water services of our forests. Thank you.
Maybe I'll give you a hypothetical project in Bhutan, which can probably address quite a few issues from Jimmy, from you, and from spirituality question. Let's say we develop a national park, and currently it's not fully covered. Part of the land is actually available to plant new trees, okay? And for that part, it qualifies as additionality. It will have carbon credit, yeah. But carbon credit alone is not going to be enough to finance the entire development of this part of a new national park. You need to have additional income. Where are the income should be coming from? Now, let me give you 5 sources of income. Number one, the national park, you can actually entertain some tourism, limited amount, right? And this tourism will involve entrance fees. You can sell, right, the entrance ticket. Or you can actually give a license to an operator with 20 years of running the park. Then you can collect the 20 years income immediately, right? And secondly, there's tourist attractions. For example, you have a cable car, which can go up to the mountain. And the cable car operator will charge money, and you will charge the cable car company some fees and revenues and royalties and so on, the second income. Thirdly, you probably need a couple of hotels, right? And the hotel will have to apply a license from the government, and the government will charge the licensing, yeah? And fourthly, it's a water. I think in a national park, there must be very clean water, yeah? And these water can be bottled and named as from Himalaya, and it can be selling very high price in some other countries, yeah, with brand name, so water. And the fifth one is agro-business. Yeah, within the national park, you may actually find a couple of places where you can grow herbs, which is high value added. So with 5 income plus carbon credit, this project will become bankable.
Michael, you want to add, or I will say that we have around hardly 4 minutes, and I want to hear the last views from each speaker within a minute.
I would only be repeating what was just said. And there are a lot of people that find it abhorrent to think of conservation in a commercial sense, or a national park in a commercial sense. But to think we can only live on new income from carbon credits is probably a fallacy, because the way the legal system and the science system and the accounting system is, they're likely to be commoditized. So like you said, they're $4 a ton for avoidance of disrupting the existing forest. So the 6th income and the 7th income and the 8th income belong to you and your imagination and your creativity. But what you're actually doing is you're creating the biodiversity co-benefits that have additional value, and you need to monetize those.
Thank you. I think we have come to our last round, and I still want to give a floor to each panelist to have your last say on what we have been discussing. So may I now go to Harry? Within 30 seconds, I would be good to
in 10 seconds. I'd like just to add to what Dr. Ma has said, and Michael said, and Jimmy has said. It is a bit of a conundrum in the case of Bhutan, in the sense that you have done such good, whereas in the case of the carbon projects that I'm working with, it's the opposite. We're looking at a rate of deforestation that is abhorrent and very difficult to manage. So what we're hoping to do is to establish a precedent to demonstrate to the government, whether it's state government or the federal government, that there is an alternative to cutting trees. There are other forms of revenue streams, and the co-benefits that are available are actually quite tangible, and we aim to prove that, and we should be able to do that in very short order, given the maturity of the projects. I think that Bhutan is in a unique position where you have a negative carbon position that is value. And there is an opportunity where you could sell that negative value to other countries that have a positive emission.
Thank you. Thank you. I go to Dr. Ma within 30 seconds, if you are.
Yeah, I want to touch upon spirituality. I think it can make money too. Why? Because it can be the most important attraction for tourism. Most people, including my Chinese fellows, I think will be so attracted to explore Bhutan because of spirituality, because of the happiness, because of peace, because of harmony. So if you can design a package to attract more tourists, then money will come for financing the tourism infrastructure, including hotel, airports, and all of these. And we can make sure these new infrastructure are green, sustainable in nature, and do not endanger the nature.
Thank you, Jimmy.
My last remarks is very simple. We have a vision, we have our plans. We have many plans, in fact. National Adaptation Plan, a long-term low-emission development strategy, and roadmaps for them. So there we have a bankable project. Of course, like there are different types of, there are different definitions about the bankable project. So we welcome projects, we welcome investors. As I said, like show us the money, but not in the form of charity. But let's work together to finance our nation building process, finance our climate actions, and finance our development, and finance the operationalization of gross national happiness. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Ma showed you the money. Don't let go, don't commoditize it. You have a sacred obligation to make your sovereign fund work, store up your surplus, and identify countries that will trade on the same ethical basis, and you'll meet their liabilities with your growing assets.
Thank you so much, the esteemed panelists. I enjoy moderating this session. I'm not going to sum it up. I want all you all to reflect, think about it, and be happy. Thank you so much.
I must say, at some point I was worried with the way the discussion was going on that there is no finance, or it will be really difficult to get the finance required. But then towards the end, Dr. Ma, like Michael rightly pointed out, there are avenues to raise funds, to make money. So I think that's a wonderful way to bring an end to that panel discussion. And to close today's session, we have a vital panel on integrated pathways to climate justice and holistic development in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. So this discussion will bring together insights on how voluntary actions, enforceable laws, community-led initiatives can combine to shape a regenerative future. So To lead this conversation, I would like to call on stage Pema Chorin Siring, an expert. She asked several questions already. So she's an expert in public international law. She has represented clients at the International Court of Justice and the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. She has also worked on high-profile climate change cases. So basically, she brings this deep experience in international dispute resolution, arbitration, with a keen focus on, I can't see Pema. Okay. With keen focus on environmental and climate justice issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, for our final panel for the two-day conference, please join me in welcoming Pema Chorin Siring and our distinguished panelists on the stage.
If I could just invite my panelists to come up. And in the meantime, I'll give a bit of a roadmap as to what you can all expect in the next 45 minutes. Very conscious that we are standing between you and the end of this conference. Essentially, we'll have a brief opening. Then I'd like to invite my esteemed panel to sort of introduce themselves and maybe speak, over 2 or 3 minutes, what points they'd like to make. And then I have one question each for my panelists before I want to open the floor, open for questions to the floor, because on the floor I was itching to ask many, many questions, and so I'm sure it'll be the same for everyone here as well. I think the previous panel was a good place to start. We've talked about COP, and COP has been something that's on my mind because, as Sharab mentioned, I've worked on these climate change cases, and in theory, we had discussed a lot about how, 30 years of COP, if not more, and yet we haven't really managed to solve this crisis. A variety of reasons, of course. And earlier there was a discussion of, whether it's the developed world that's stacked the cards against us, or whether it's that we, the Global South, have been a bit apathetic about our own role in what we can do at these forums. I think there's value in both sides. Now, when we talk about climate justice, I want to sort of scene set, right? Because the climate, there are these two big sort of high-level cases that are happening, or well, they've concluded. One was the first ever case. It was brought by the small island developing states. Now, they've been pushing, and I think one thing one has to remember when we talk about going to the grassroots, right? These incredible cases that now people like me, who actually, I'm not really a climate person. I wish I could say I was. There have been people who've been living and breathing this for 30 years, 40 years, right? It's purely because I am an expert in the procedure of these international courts that I got to do these cases. So I'm afraid I can't really say with pride that I lived and breathed this until recently. Now, when the states, the small island states, were talking about how they're facing an existential crisis. The rising sea levels means that many island countries are at risk of immediate sort of decimation, as it were. Young Pacific Islander students actually started pushing their governments to say, what are we doing about this? Every year our governments meet. Every year it's scheduled. They go to these conferences and they meet. And they have, it's 2 weeks, you seemingly putting your heads together, so much money is being spent, and yet the crisis gets worse every single year, right? So these students said, why don't we use international law? Now, of course, this year, given all of the things that's happening in the Middle East and everything else, I feel a certain degree of shame to call myself an international lawyer because we're seeing the failure of the system. But one has to understand that so much of what works as well, us flying places, sending post, all of that is because international law works. This is sort of what was the catalyst for bringing these cases to to the international courts. And then we've sort of moved on in that these are advisory opinions that we're asking the courts to tell us what is the sort of, what are the legal obligations of states in relation to climate change. So it might sound like a very basic question because we all think it's obvious, but then again, the obvious is not so clear in the way that they say common sense is not so common. This is happening at the higher level, right? Then you have at the domestic levels in various jurisdictions, cases that are, moving the needle. And a very good example of it, just I think about 2 weeks ago, in a regional court in Germany, I think this was Hamm, there was a case brought by a Peruvian national in Germany regarding sort of the historical emissions of RWE, a sort of multinational company, because the claimant basically said that, plaintiff, I'm sorry, said that these historical emissions had exacerbated the glacial melt in the Andes, and so his village was at imminent risk of being sort of washed away. And here in Bhutan, we know the context. Last year, Lunana, every year we talk about these gloughs and what that could mean for us. Sikkim, Himachal Pradesh, Pakistan, this case, sadly, in a sense, the court said they couldn't make a positive finding. Now, it's a technicality as I see it, about they couldn't find this imminent harm problem, but they did say, in principle, corporate emitters can in fact be held responsible for climate harms, as it were. So it's important now. This is 2 weeks ago, so sort of watch this space, right? And so I think there is, in the climate justice space, there's a lot, there's a role for all of us, as it were. So without sort of getting carried away, I'd like to invite my panelists to introduce yourselves and say what you will. I will start with Dr. Cattell.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, Kempos, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and huge gratitude to Tarayana Foundation for this opportunity. I'm severely nervous now because I have a teacher, my boss, and students in the audience. So, yeah, I work at the College of Natural Resources, and I'm not a lawyer. Sorry about that. I come from biological science. Probably my answer would be, your question would be from the perspective of biological sciences. What got me thinking this afternoon is that when Sneha was presenting this, how can we capitalize AI? Yesterday also, I listened to the AI, and in the age of AI, I was actually thinking about how can we actually make this AI better in terms of generating data and publications? Because I was looking at the contributions to global science and policy perspective. If I look at from this region is represented by 20% of the global population. And then in the Himalaya, it's, I think, 13% of the population, of the global population are on the mountains. And if we just look at global publications, actually in the IPCC, there are, I think, less than 3%. That's what I found. So when you talk about, ideas, yesterday, Andrew was talking about ideas can remain ideas, if we do not actually go beyond what we can do. How do we visualize what is the issues and where do we want to go? So that actually got me a lot of thinking, how can we actually contribute? And I come from university, and then from the university perspective, where do I stand? And there's a big question that actually I was asking myself. So I think I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Sonam Wangchuk from Ladakh, and I've been, I did my engineering, but I like to call myself more of a problem solver. and an educator, and while addressing education, I got interested in what it is for, and environment, and now the climate crisis is definitely the biggest problem to solve. And having come here, I saw beautiful contributions from different people about from religious institutions to education to law, democracy. And these are the things I think need to be redefined now. Humanity has never faced a crisis like what it is facing now, particularly the HKH region, which is a topic of discussion now. We hold much of the fresh water of the world, the third pole, on which 2 billion people, 1/4 of the population of the world, directly or indirectly depend. And it holds so many forests that hold the carbon, without our new methods. And water, so much of water for this many people. So definitely this place deserves special care, concern, not just for itself, but for the entire humanity. And therefore, we need to redefine what education should be. I'll come to details later, but generally speaking, in post-climate change era, education has to address this issue, and post-climate change democracy needs to address this issue. Parliaments should perhaps bring nature into the house, and similarly law doesn't even recognize the slow poisoning that we go through. You only recognize stabbing and shooting. So all these economics, we have played around with money a lot. Maybe a new form of currency, apart from just credits, needs to trickle down to every individual. I might come to details later. But yes, even God itself needs to be redefined, because most violence today happens through climate and environment related things. So there's a huge upgrade needed on this planet.
Good evening. Just to begin with, I'm sort of using my company like this by being mindful as a Bhutanese man. I'm Pema Jamso. I'm with the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD as it is called. And Dr. Sonam has just mentioned about the Hindu Kush Himalayas. So ICIMOD is actually mandated to look at the issues facing the mountain communities, as well as the challenges, environmental challenges, climate challenges, economic challenges that the mountains, the Hindu Kush Himalayan region is facing. And as Sonam also briefly mentioned, that the HKH region, as it is called, is the third pole. It's often referred to as the third pole. And now we have a very active dialogue going with the Arctic Circle, the North Pole, and we're looking at how we can exchange experiences and learnings. Now, as water towers of Asia, we all know that 10 of the largest river systems of Asia actually have their origins in the Hindu Kush Himalayas, the Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, even the Mekong. So the importance of protecting this region, which is unique, in terms of its biological diversity, cultural diversity, and its ecosystem services. I think every one of us now in this room and beyond also appreciate that. And we have here the Excellencies, the Limbos, the Venerable Lupins, and all distinguished speakers from within Bhutan and from outside. And we need to look at how we can protect this unique region. So I will stop here at the moment, but I will come back later to some of the challenges that we are facing and how we are trying to address them. Thank you.
Once again, thank you. I'm Senchu Novu, and my background is on soil and land management. And one of my problems sitting here is, if somebody talks, if I'm a moderator too much, I like to control him. time is. But when I talk too much, if somebody says, your time is, I get a bit upset. I want to talk more. So that is my actually problem. But having said that, let me reflect on my observations. I actually participated in a number of COPs, be it climate change, biodiversity, desertification. So I have seen through and through. And what I have noticed is, wherever there is a money, people tend to concentrate on that and discuss more on that. And that is where the excitement builds on. But my own personal observation is, particularly like Hindu Kush, like country like Bhutan, Nepal, I think land is dearest to our heart, to our farmers. If you can take care of your land, you can really solve climate change, you can solve biodiversity problems, water issues. But we don't do that. We want to look at the glaciers. Everyone is talking on that. What exactly can a household do to stop that receding? We are not possible. It is a collective, it's a global responsibility. So this is where the irony is. And my own recommendation is we look into our agriculture system, farming system. Like Tarayana is working in the remote villages. I would say that probably building on a good database. And I heard that you are building a database, so and so. And when you build a database or survey, I think it's not a straightforward answer. I think if you consult, reach out, I think you can really collect the information, what is required now and then. If you do it on your own, you will say that, oh, I missed this one. By then again, you have to come back. It's a really resource incentive. Anything you do a disturb farmer, firstly, it is a resource incentive. Secondly, farmers have their own time. They will not be available for your question and answers. And if you come again and again, it will be irritants for them. You may not, get a cooperation from them when you visit next time. So in this line, I would say that probably we need to really reflect on our projects, programs, how we are actually aligning. So if you do that, I mean, definitely we will be happy. We will be operationalizing GNH in Bhutan, I believe, across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you. I was afraid I'd have to. Sorry, I was afraid I'd have to stop you, but you were very good on time. I want to just sort of pick up on a point that was mentioned in the earlier panel by Chimi Dorji about how we're not asking for charity. And I think that's a very critical point to make in the context of the cases. I realized I sort of did a whistle-stop tour of the cases I'm doing, and I didn't really explain what sort of also brought it about, right? Because so much of the current system almost, we've heard about the 1.3 trillion shortfall, that the global south effectively requires from the global north. Developing is a term that's a little bit sort of loaded. I think what the global south has demanded at these forums is that they're not asking for any more charity from the developed world. I'm sorry, I used that word again. But rather, it's that historical emissions, the current state that we're in has been caused by industrial nations that have eked out as much, extracted as much as they could from the globe, right? And now we have the irony where they know how to play, they know the rules. And so, we're being sort of disincentivized in a sense, the reforestation point made earlier as well. And so the Global South is saying, no, we're just saying, let's level the playing field. If you are responsible, you pay up. And that includes, technology transfer and all of that. Nobody's asking for a free lunch. We're just asking that we do a fair accounting, right? And I think that's critical to remember. Because otherwise, we again have, a polarization of, I'm sorry to say this, but white saviors and all of that, right? We're not asking to be saved, right? So I just want to sort of make that point. Now, I'll start with my first question, and this is to Professor Cattell. Now, yesterday, Tan Sri Andrew referred to the ancient mariner, and he said, water, water everywhere, drop to drink. And this goes to the point that Sonam also mentioned with us having so much water effectively. But now I confess, again, to then touch on what my Dasho also said, that for the past 3 years, I've been so focused on advocating solely for our melting glaciers at the COPs and in legal forums. But yesterday, Pemasi Tenzin on one of the panels said, we, Bhutan, are not just mountains and glaciers. We are tropical forests, tribal areas, and more, right? And of course, this holds true across the HKH region. So in that context, Professor Katel, what are your reflections about the challenges faced by Bhutan and the wider HKH region? And how can we all join you in making a meaningful impact on the understanding and management of natural resources?
Very interesting question, but at the same time difficult as well. I'd like to pick up from Michael's comments earlier. He said, do your science, prepare yourself, show the evidence, then you can sell it. So I think in terms of, I again think of data. Of course, we have this National Center for Hydrology and Meteorology. They have generated huge sets of data for now. But I think when we talk about climate change, it's not only about one discipline. We need to bring different stakeholders on board. We need to look at from the different perspective. Excuse me. What young people, students ask questions to me is, when you look at the literature, they have actually looked at from since 1820. For the last 200 years, they have generated data on temperature, precipitation, but then they also started awareness discussing about climate change since 1970s. I think it was Brundtland Commission. So even from 1970s until now, it is 50 plus years. So until now, what are we doing is a big question. And then climate change, when you talk about that, if you just look at temperature, precipitation, I think in terms of greenhouse gas concentrations, day before yesterday, I was checking the greenhouse gas concentrations. It's, I think, 430 point something ppm. And they say that if we need to maintain the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, then we need to maintain 350 to 400 ppm until 2100. So we are here at 2025, and when I look at ppm, that's a scary picture. And what that means to younger generation is sometimes, my professor used to say that there are good news and bad news. Good news is that I would be long gone because I would not live another 50, 80 years. I'm already 60, 70 years. And bad news is younger generations. And they say that if you say this, we get anxiety because we have not contributed anything. And then you are tasking us for the issues which we have not created. What are you talking about? And I think it's a personal story as well. It's not only climate change. It's not only about science. It's a personal story. It's about mental health. It's about losing livelihood. It's about losing schooling, education, things like that. So I think in terms of educating our children, we talked a lot about how can we pass the cultural genes in addition to the hereditary genes so that they listen to us, so that they carry our traditions and culture. I think that's what we talked yesterday in one of the sessions. So, and then Sir Sonam also talked similar things with value. So, but in terms of this changing climate, young people ask me, there are things that you could actually, the elderly generations, the earlier generations, they could have already thought about it. They are just shifting the burden to us. Is it fair? This is the question, and I have no answer.
Thank you, Professor Katal. Now, I have the challenge that this esteemed panel can all actually answer these questions, but now I have to be targeted in the interest of time. But perhaps I can ask Dr. Sencho if you might want to sort of chime in on this, if at all. The question about, the challenges that we face, locally as well, right, in Bhutan and the wider region, and sort of what could we do to try and, protect our natural resources, as it were. You mentioned soil, right, and so perhaps you might want to add to what Professor Katal said.
Thank you. Let's look at the water. Now, there are areas that the water sources are drying, and some of our colleagues believe that we are having too many trees, which I doubt that is the case. And we also believe that communities are not really managing their watershed. I mean, that's what they believe. But the concern we have in our own local context is the water that is coming from the glacial sources is quite limited. If I'm not mistaken, it's less than 15%. Most of the water that we see in our 5 perennial river system comes from our watershed. But bit coming down to the mid-hills of our farming community, there we don't have high mountains where there's a snow or glaciers, no. But then the challenge is we hear a lot of farmers saying water sources are dying. But we do also have our clean water still flowing, and our friends downstreams are enjoying. But in a sense, we are not able to fully operate or utilize with the investment. Of course, this comes with the cost. We don't have any reserve dams that we use for water or agriculture purposes, no. It's all for hydro. So it's really time. First, we look into building reservoirs for our farming community, for our own drinking purpose. Secondly, we must explore the underground water that is there along the southern belt. And we have so many fears, drying up, underground, blah, blah. But across our neighbor, they're enjoying it. They have no other sources. So for us, as long as the monsoon comes on time, regularly, we should not be having a problem of this crisis if we know where the sources is and how we use sustainably. Thank you.
Add and clarify something, the importance of glaciers. In quantity, maybe it is less than 15% or 11% in most rivers, I'm told, except Indus, where it is 49% or so. But the point is that glacial melt comes when farmers need the most. Rainwater, you can get 99%, and that will be the biggest disaster, because when you get, it will be floods. And when you don't, it will be drought. So glaciers play that very significant role. Of all the water that falls, I think we don't even use 2%. Of that, more than half would be glacial water in most cases, because in spring, when you really need the most for plants, that's when the glaciers help. And that's why in Ladakh, we are trying to develop man-made artificial glaciers, trying to refreeze the winter water, which otherwise goes waste, so that it is available in springtime. It's not issue about water per se, it's about water at the time when you need. When you don't need, we get floods. We don't need that water. Somebody take away and we'll be happier. That's the issue with water. And therefore, I often think and say that like carbon credit, there should be water credit. These are related, actually interlinked also. When you have forests conserved, you have water also conserved. Next to glacier is forests. As long as you have forests, and you're lucky to take good care of forests in Bhutan, you will have some regulation of water because of the forest. But what is happening in most of Hindu-Kush Himalayas is, on one hand, glaciers are melting. On the other hand, you're cutting the forest. So there's nothing to soak in monsoon, therefore floods, and there's nothing to release it in the rest of the times, droughts. So water may be 100%, but it will be disastrously at the wrong times, is the concern.
Thank you for that intervention. And I just feel it's such a pity that we didn't have a voice like yours at the International Court of Justice, because I was painfully aware of the lack of adequate representation. The challenge that the mountains we've had at COP and at the UN and similar forums is that we've been lumped under the cryosphere for so long. There's an issue with that in that the Arctic Circle and these other sort of ice laden places, right, are advocated for by the great powers because there is a lot of strategic interest. Rather insidiously, powers, Western powers, are maybe I'm being unfair, but they are in a sense happy that the ice is melting at the poles because it means that a new sea route is opening up. Until now, it was Russia and a few other places. You read the naval journals and it'll tell you that. This is not just my sort of, I don't know, not going on a jaunt here, but they have had concerns about how Russia controls the Arctic. But now, because the ice is melting, many powers are happy about the fact that their military ships can also make the advance up there. So it's critical to remember that many people at the table may not share the same interests, and I saw that for the glaciers, which is why it is important for us to keep advocating for that. And I just really wish you'd been there. What a compelling testimony you would have given at the International Court of Justice. Now, I want to pivot to Dr. Pema. I confess now, I think you'll see a running trend. I confess to a little fatigue that has set in after seeing the two COPs, because I went to COP 28 and 29 as part of the Bhutan delegation, and also these two climate change advisory opinions. A cynicism, in a sense, has set in by confronting the invisible walls and these glass ceilings that have been put in place by the global north. And I noticed that there is strangely a disconnect between the science, the law, and policy, which is why maybe 30 years or whatever on, we are not fixing this crisis. Now, ICIMOD is a regional intergovernmental organization that's been focused on learning and knowledge sharing since 1981, and it has 8 significant member countries of the HKH that we referred to earlier. I should be clear, there are the membership comprises of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. So my question to Dr. Pema, who is the Director General of ICIMOD, and we're very proud that he's the first Bhutanese to have taken this role. How can ICIMOD evolve an integrated regional governance platform that supports ecological policy and community-led initiatives? So in essence, to try and break this sort of silo that seems to exist.
Okay. Before that, let me just touch briefly on Senju and Sonam's discussion on water. I think we have to recognize that climate change is really, quite a lot about water. Either too much water or too little water. Too much water, we have disasters like floods. Too little water, we have drought, heat waves, and so on. So if we can address the issue of water, too much water or too little water, many of the challenges that we are facing could be actually addressed. Now, let me come back to your question, Sring. Well, ICIMOD is working in this very complex geopolitical setting. But having said that, we know that climate change is a transboundary issue. It doesn't recognize borders. The other climate crisis, the planetary crisis, air pollution. Pollution is a transboundary issue. Biodiversity loss is a transboundary issue. So unless the countries in this region come together, we are not going to be able to address any of these crises. So therefore, ICIMOD, as the regional organization, I think the first thing we do is that we remain apolitical, non-political, neutral. So as a neutral convener, we are able to bring the scientists, the policymakers, the decision makers, the practitioners, the farmers, students to come together and discuss this common challenges and issues. This is about connecting people, communicating to each other, talking about coordination, talking about collaboration. So we regularly organize things called science policy dialogue. And now we have also extended that to include the investors. So science, policy, finance dialogue. Now we go a step beyond and include the practitioners. So we operate in the interface between science, policy, and practice. Now integrating scientific evidence with indigenous knowledge. Then we work at different levels, from governments to grassroots level organizations. So we are also here actively working with Tarayana Foundation. Do you have one more?
I'm afraid I might have to cut you off there. Thank you. I'm really conscious of time, but I want to ask my next question to Sonam. And this picks up on what Daniel Fung mentioned earlier about deep listening, and also what Yellow Wouters said about the deep listening to the mountains and glaciers. Now, you have truly lived and breathed this deep listening. While the glaciers around the world are dying at alarming paces, you built the ice stupas, a man-made wonder that mimics the nature-made wonders that glaciers are. How can we, in your view, promote an effective strategy for placing traditional and ancestral wisdom that you mentioned in your session this morning at the center of decision-making, away from this current paradigm of sort of profits maximization and profits first? And how do we emphasize the limits of money and then the power of degrowth and the sacred pause and economic rest and the rest of that?
Thank you. First of all, yes, about glaciers and forests that really are what makes life livable in most of these mountains. Development, economic or otherwise, does not need to be you destroy something and then you repair and there's transaction of money in that and that's your growth and GDP, whatnot. We need to learn to do less and not too much. That's what GNH against GDP is. GDP can grow when there's crime, when there's destruction, and the repair, it all reflects positively. I'm sure the Sikkim flash flood and the destruction and the exchange gone in repairing the damage must have raised the GDP of Sikkim. But wisdom is different. These are all what I call cleverness. Cleverness is this monkey mind that is jumping about what it can do. Wisdom is in realizing the futility of doing what is not wise to do and doing less, and therefore conserving what is there. To keep the glaciers, to keep the forests is what wisdom should lead. And that's what I say, redefine education. Redefine education into doing not too much, but keeping what already exists and traditions that take stewardship of these. Coming to money, as Dashula also mentioned, the world tends to bend towards where there is money. Yeah? I've been thinking, and I would like to pose this question I've been thinking among many, banking and economic experts here. After trying all kinds of awareness building and so on, there's so much awareness today, but there's hardly any action. We're just helplessly slipping down the same thing. We know what is at the bottom. So maybe human nature is not about awareness and understanding. Maybe we should play into what human nature plays with, and that is maybe greed and growth and all that. So I've been wondering, why don't we change the programming of that human nature by coining a new currency? Why don't we redefine economics? If you think of the current currencies, dollars, rupees, they were based on gold in the past, not anymore, but on gold. Gold being the most precious material that everybody valued could become the base of the currency which everybody respected. Today, the most precious element is not gold, it's actually oxygen, which is getting shorter and shorter, and carbon dioxide, which is becoming a problem. And therefore, can't we play around and create a currency that is based on oxygen, that is based on carbon capture, and that then is valued and recognized by all countries, and therefore trading happens in that? If that happens, then countries that preserve and conserve their forests will be rewarded. It's like Bhutan finding a big gold mine in its forests. It's like Ladakh, if it plants all the more trees, it's creating gold, which then is respected in a currency, and thereby it plays into basic human nature, and growth will happen, but on carbon capture and oxygen release. Only that kind of going deep into human nature might save our behavior, human behavior. And then we are not worried. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Then we won't be worried if the global powers bend towards money of this kind. So something needs to be done, please. Yeah, I propose it to all of you to think of a basic shift in what we see.
That's a remarkable suggestion, and remarkable doesn't cut it, but I think that might be food for thought for an entire conference. And you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you. Conscious of time and my promise that I would open up, to questions, I want to ask my last question to Tashu Sencho, and then I will have to beg the indulgence of the organizers for some closing remarks. Tashu, now, this was alluded to by Dr. Pema regarding our geopolitics, but our region, SAARC, and the HKH region has been a bit notorious for fragmentation. Sadly, in my view, a relic of the colonizers in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the British policy of divide and rule, which insidiously continues to wreak havoc even today. Insidious also because countries like Bhutan and Nepal were never colonized, and yet, we suffer on. But I want to take up the Tarayana ED, Sonam Pem's siren call yesterday for us to move away from fragmentation to interconnectedness. And so, Tashu, I want to ask for your views on how we, and this is sort of action-oriented, right? This was asked earlier, but how can we in the Himalayas build a united alliance, to speak with one voice in global platforms like COP, UN, the G20, and to advocate a shift from reactive participation to proactive leadership?
Thank you. Before I come to that question, I have to share another experience. But having said that, I think the first thing we need to look at in our own local context. Now, for example, in our own local context, we have a climate change focal person, we have a biodiversity focal person, we have a desertification focal, we have a GCF, that's a financing climate, we have JEF. How often do we meet in our own local to share for what you're going, what are your issues? Did it ever happen? I doubt. Now, if you cannot connect locally, how can you think of bringing countries together? So the basic, I would say that, to the young generations who are in the civil service, I think it's high time that you have an annual coordination in a platform where all these GCF, JEF, World Bank, they come together. Now, if you ask any banks like ADB or World Bank or GCF, JEF, your procedures are too lengthy, it's so demanding. No, we didn't do it. Your countries have done it. But on the field, do you know that who are attending this? No. So first step I would really urge is that you need to come together and really share. And even after the COP, come for debriefing. What has been taken place is not happening. Now then, like in the previous session, we are saying, the lawyer said, we are dominated by developed countries. They would do. For instance, EU. I think for the EU delegation, I think every 6 months they rotate their presidency. But that stand doesn't change. Because they're well informed aware what is the next agenda going to be discussed. They will be discussing among themselves. So we must have a habit of building our own team and preparing ourselves, be it climate change, biodiversity, or desertification, or for that matter, JEF Council or GCF board meeting. And I'm not so sure whether our representations from the finance ministry ever come and to the agriculture or other sectors. I'm going for a board meeting. What can exactly we can bring to that table? I'm actually a bit concerned on this line. This is something that we need to change. Now, if you are at the local, very firm in your team, and you speak one as a voice, I think you can encourage the other members to join. But this disease is not limited to Bhutan. I've seen same through our Asian countries where I visited, and I'm known for that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we've run out of time, but I will ask the audience your indulgence for maybe 5 more minutes, because I promised to open the floor to questions, and so 4 minutes of that will be for questions. So, and this is also promised. Daniel, I see that you are already...
And as somebody who's also submitted an amicus curiae brief to the International Court of Arbitration on the South China Sea, I'd like to say one thing, that the deployment of law as a tool to effect climate justice should not be overlooked. And therefore, I commend you, Prem, leading this panel, and I commend everybody here. And I'd like to just end by noting how much advance we've made. In 1975, as a young pupil, just freshly called to the English bar, I participated in a very small way in a case called the Ocean Island case, which some might know, many do not anymore. Because what happened was, in the year 1900, phosphate was discovered on this island called Banaba, which is today part of Kiribati. That was a tragedy for that island, because the British Empire granted a lease to a phosphate mining company. They cut down all the trees and they mined the phosphate. The islanders originally leased the land. After a while, they thought that this is no good because there's no replanting at all, no reforestation. They refused. What the government did was to forcibly force the islanders to sell the land, and there was devastation. In 1975, they brought a case in the English High Court, led by a famous silk called Sam Stamler. I was part of that team, to claim justice, climate justice. In 1977, the English High Court rejected that case, saying that there's no fiduciary duty owed to the islanders. And in any event, the whole case was time-barred. It's too long. Now, today I'm heartened to learn from Pem that of the German case, where the Peruvian sued the German government successfully, German domestic court. And I think this tool of the law must be deployed, because I think the time is long past when we attend all these conferences, including at COP, which I confess I will also be attending. But we are realistic to know the limitations to a dialogue. There must be some action, and the law is a tool. And I don't want to say any more because it's the topic for yet another series of conferences. But this is a very, very powerful tool that small nations, let's say Bhutan, can deploy to their benefit, because with the devastation that we're suffering, and the whole globe is suffering from that, with the effects, deleterious effects on the Trans-Himalayan region of the glaciers, there has to be some redress. And the law is, I repeat, a powerful tool.
Thank you. With the permission of our moderator, I just want to share one very inspiring story from China. Something that Jack Ma is doing. And I hope our Ma Jun and other bankers and investors here would probably take that idea up. And we have the decision makers. We have also our spiritual leaders here. I think this is something that combines, brings together all that we have been discussing over the last 2 days. Digital technology, how it can be used to provide climate justice and also address some of the issues that we have been discussing. Now, some of you may be having the pedometer watch. Okay. He has introduced a scheme where people are encouraged to walk, and once they've accumulated a certain number of steps, it is monetized. But the money doesn't come to you as payouts. It is credited to the plantation of a tree in your name. Now imagine that. If we can do that in China, and if we can do that in India, if we can do that in Bhutan, if we can do that in Nepal, there would be a greening of minds, greening of hearts, and greening of money. So I think this is something that is very practical. It can be done, and it can be done at every level. So this is the message I would like to leave. It is already systemized, like digitized, and money comes from Jack Ma. Jack Ma, the billionaire. So we have also one Jun Ma here. So we need to challenge him to start this scheme. And I think this is a very practical thing and which can be done. We live in a very dangerous world, after listening to everybody, digital content creation, digital infrastructure. So it looks like we have to also be very much aware that we are living at a time when most information are fake, when intelligence have become artificial, and we run the risk of being very superficial. And that is something that we all need to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so that my thing to open the floor is not performative, I will invite one more question or comment if there is any pressing one. Anyone on the floor? Going once? Going twice? All right. I see none, so I will close. We've had quite a lot of discussion. There's a lot more work to be done. This entire conference has given us so much food for thought, and I think it's serendipitous that this is happening now. We in Bhutan especially, I feel, we owe it to the world and to GNH's architect, the Great Fourth, His Majesty King Jimmy Singh Wanshu, to operationalize GNH in the context of the wider world so that it is understood in terms of the global lingo and its benefits can be truly enjoyed by citizens of the world and all sentient beings, elephants and golden langurs included. As Her Majesty the Gyayum aptly said yesterday, we are at a critical point where GNH offers the world an alternate path. There was talk of intergenerational justice and how we can make the world a better place. His Majesty the King Jimmy Khesan Namgyal Wanshu's vision for GMC is exactly that, a bold new chapter for operationalizing GNH. I want to pick on what Tim Hwang had said yesterday about the sacred pause. And I think this is the moment for that sacred pause. And in this pause, we must, with the great humility that Daniel Fung mentioned earlier, we have to understand why we failed in the past. To quote Dr. Balasubramaniam, accepting our own vulnerabilities in order to solve our problems. And in closing, I just want to quote Tan Sri Andrew again. We are embarking on a journey into the unknown, but we can only walk this path if we walk it together. Thank you. It's been an honor to be on this panel. Thank you very much for your patience.
So that was it. Yeah, final panel for the two-day conference. Thank you, the moderator and the panelists, for taking us through an insightful discussion. Now, without further ado, I would like to request on stage the director of Georgetown Institute of Open and Advanced Studies, Tan Sri Andrew Shang, to give the closing remarks and read out the conference statement.
I think I have to do this right. Yeah, Your Excellencies, we are so honored by your presence today. We have the Ministers of Home Affairs, Agriculture and Transport here to help us celebrate the closing of this wonderful occasion conference. Now, as you know, this event was designed as a celebration of the twin birthdays of His Majesty, the King and the spiritual leader. This was a very heavy responsibility. But I want to congratulate the people of Bhutan, especially, our co-hosts, the Taranea Foundation, and all the peoples who have worked so hard, to make this event so successful. What I said earlier in my opening remarks to the conference, we came, we saw, we were conquered. We were awed by the majesties of your mountain, the spiritualities of your rivers, the glory of your land, and the beauty and dignities of your people. Now, in trying to sum up what this conference was all about, we are trying to actually operationalize the wonderful concept of gross national happiness. So I'm not going to try to summarize what many of you, experts from Bhutan and from abroad, have poured their hearts out, showing what was possible to go down this path of gross national happiness. I was struck by Dasho Kamaura's that happiness depends upon the family, depends on the integrity of the village, the country, and the planet. So, trying to understand the principles of what Her Majesty said that founded Taranea Foundation, the importance of dignity, the reliance on local wisdom, and finally, true partnership. We constructed a message, not a declaration. We toyed with the idea of a declaration, but I think it's more true. It is a message of how some of us feel that what we have probably can draw from the last 2 days. So the participants gathered here at this conference, convened under the royal patronage of Her Majesty the Queen Mother Dorji Wangmo Wangchuk. First, we know in our hearts that it is possible for humanity to live in harmony with itself and the earth. We acknowledge that economic growth alone cannot secure human flourishing or planetary balance. We recognize the urgent need for a new development model rooted in ecological balance, human fulfillment, and cultural wisdom. We believe that real transformation to gross national happiness requires collective commitment and systemic redesign across all domains of life. So what we would like to reflect on is to invite all friends, wherever they are, in Bhutan, in Asia, in Europe, Americas, Africas, everywhere, to join us in building an enabling ecosystem to operationalize GNH. So how could be this done? And I think this conference, as it unfolds, show that first we must measure what matters. We must do as what Bhutanese have done to redefine success across all 7 spheres of life: environmental, physical, emotional, social, occupational, intellectual, and spiritual. But we must also cultivate the right mindset, the right paradigm and integrals of self to awaken self-awareness, compassion, and coherence in action. And I think we heard very clearly we need to embed deep observation and ecological design principles in how we live, build, and regenerate our ecosystems. We must also develop ethical and inclusive digital public infrastructures to empower grassroots communities and enable open, transparent governance. We should foster place-based, holistic education that nurtures lifelong learning, ecological literacy, and regenerative leadership. Leadership with faith, and dignity and values. And we must strengthen regenerative livelihoods, local communities, economies, and circular finance systems that serve both the people and the planet. And revitalizing mindful recreation and well-being practices to restore collective joy, creativity, and cultural resilience. And of course, we must build participatory and responsible local governance systems rooted in trust, shared stewardship, compassionate decision-making, and democracy of voice, and empowering all to make this journey possible. Now, so we further commit to nurturing an open, flexible, and living network of cooperation, beginning with those who are here today. This network, we hope, will serve to become a shared field for collaboration, learning, advocacy, and action, cultivating ecosystems of initiatives needed to operationalize GNH across villages, nations, and the world. So this seems to be a very long list of things to do. But I just want to repeat more precisely what I said earlier by this Spanish poet, Antonio Machado. Walker, there is no road. The road is made by walking. What we have done here today, amongst all many friends here, is to try to walk the road of gross national happiness. The vision was been set out by His Majesty. It is our responsibility and our duty to make that possible. And that could only have been possible, if I may say so, and I say this from the deepest part of my heart, on behalf of JIOS, our foreign friends who are here, we would really like to thank, our partners, specifically Tarayana Foundation under the patronage of Her Majesty, the Queen Mother, led ably by Aung Chime, Sunampem, Dr. Sangye, Kicho, Tulsi, and many others I cannot name. I particularly want to thank them for their utter devotion to making this event a total success. Thank you. I cannot stop there, but I cannot do this before my dementia sets in. I have to thank our very able young MC for his patience and eloquence. I next have to thank all the staff of the Royal Academy for allowing us, and of course His Majesty, for allowing us to have this magnificent hall, to be here to convene this event. Thank you. Next, I would certainly want to thank all our speakers and panelists who have come so far away and shared their time, their wisdoms, their wit, their inspirations, all to give us ideas for which to walk down this future journey. Thank you very much. Of course, I cannot but thank all the young ones who have sat here patiently and all the participants to listen to all these words of wisdom, maybe lots of technical terminology that you've never heard before, and we hope a little bit of it, has been carried in your hearts for what you really want to do. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you for making this event possible. And last but not least, I have to thank my colleague, Snehapoda, and her team. I think they should all be thanked because they have worked effortlessly together with John Crawford at the University of Glasgow, I beg your pardon. How can I make such a big mistake? And every single one of you, I know many of you have not slept and worked tirelessly, effortlessly to make this event possible. And of course, my last, thanks have to go to my team from GEOS, led by Eng, Ali, and all the other people, Sorry, I have to a little bit postscript. Thank you. I do have one postscript. In all these ventures of my life, I have to thank my wife for her patience, her love, and her support. Without all this could not have been possible. And so on that note, let me thank all of you for making this event a great success. What we will do tomorrow, before we embark on the tour for some of our foreign visitors, is to really sit down and reflect what we could do to be in true partnership with you on this journey towards global and gross national happiness. Thank you very much indeed. If I've forgotten anything, my sincere apologies. Any mistake that has been made in this conference, are all mine, But the success is due to all of you. Thank you very much indeed.
And ladies and gentlemen, that draws the curtain for our two-day conference on operationalizing gross national happiness in Bhutan and beyond. I mean, all the thank yous has been said by Andrew Sheng. I have nothing left to say. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience, and if I had made any mistakes on my part, please have that GNH inside you to forgive me. And yes, dinner will be served at 6:30. Please take some time to relax, chat, and then maybe reflect on the 2 day that has gone by. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.